Hiccup noticed Kale glance at the other boy darkly. We don't know exactly who is in it or their plans, but we've got the gist. You guys aren't on a schedule and you don't seem to have much of a pattern to the places you hit except to destroy. I'm going to put a stop to it and you'd make your lives a whole lot easier if you helped. Kale sneered. What do our trials have to do with anything? You don't have any proof that we're part of any gang. Hiccup internally sighed. Kale was a bit more insightful than the other two. We don't have many thieves on Burke. We have even fewer vandals. I've got eyes and ears everywhere trying to catch them. What are the odds that you're caught in one of the very locations that we've been watching carefully, and you just happen to be on our list of suspects? Why were we on your list of suspects? Evan asked. Kale smacked his boot against Evan's and the boy silenced. Hiccup watched them carefully. Evan very clearly wasn't good at hiding things when under pressure. He tried to sound carefree and nonchalant, when he wasn't terrified, but Hiccup could practically see the fear radiating off of him. He could get answers out of the teen, but with Kale and Free present, he wasn't sure. Hiccup held out his hand and wiggled his fingers. Astrid dropped the keys in his palm and the boys curiously watched him unlock the door. The chief stepped inside and hauled Evan to his feet. Where are we going? Evan asked nervously. Hiccup steered him down the hall, away from the group. We're going to have a little chat away from your friends. Astrid locked the door again, but she couldn't keep the boys inside quiet. Hey, Free shouted indignantly. You can't just grill him alone like that. Actually, you'll find that he can. Astrid corrected. Evan, don't you say a word or there'll be hell to pay. Kale yelled. Quiet. Snotlout banged on the bars with his fist. Hiccup kept walking with his fingers firm on Evan's arm. Keep going. They got to the door and marched outside. Evan was momentarily blinded by the sunlight and vaguely wondered if a man with a peg leg could catch him if he tried to run, but a quick glance around the jail at all the guards sitting with their dragons, especially Toothless trotting behind them, he knew he wasn't going anywhere. The chief led him through the quiet alleys and up the stairs toward the Great Hall. Evan gulped, wondering if the council was up there. Was his trial now? What if they did decide to brand him as a thief, or banish him? Or worse? The teenager was pleasantly surprised that the Great Hall was empty, save a few cooks and bartenders. He couldn't help the small sigh of relief that escaped his lips. Hiccup glanced at him. Relax. I'm not going to bite. You're the chief. Is your bark worse? Hiccup smirked and guided him toward the meat room. Evan blinked in confusion when the chief pushed him into a chair. Watch him, bud. As he disappeared into the meat freezer, a cold room in the back of the hall full of their meat and dairy stock, Evan eyed Toothless warily. The Night Fury sat on his haunches beside the teen and watched him with wide green eyes. The dragon sniffed his hair until Evan pushed his nose away, the shackles jangling. Quit it. I'm in no mood for your big mug in my face. Evan snarled. Toothless huffed and slapped him with his tail. Ow. Stupid dragon. Hiccup re-emerged from the meat freezer with a bag of ice. Hey, be nice. You sass him, he'll sass you right back. He tossed the bag of ice at Evan, who caught it in both hands. The teen looked at him curiously and Hiccup nodded toward his shoulder. That looks painful. Ice it. Evan complied with not a little confusion, wondering why the big bad chief was being nice to him. It didn't make any sense. Where was the mighty fist people mentioned? Where was the jerky attitude Finn always griped about? When was the hammer going to fall? Hiccup took a seat across from him and leaned against his crossed arms, studying him. Evan waited until he couldn't stand the chief's penetrating green eyes any longer. What? The haddock shook his head. I'm just trying to figure you out. You act tough around your friends, but the second you're questioned, you look guilty. So you single me out to get answers where Kale and Free wouldn't. If Kale said there will be hell to pay for telling me anything, then my interest is even more piqued. Hiccup replied. You think I'm weak? Hiccup frowned. That depends on how you define weakness. You're singling me out because we're stronger in numbers. I wouldn't answer questions with Kale and Free sitting there, so you're hoping I'll answer when I'm alone. But I'm not telling you anything. I'm not buying it, Evan. Hiccup replied. Because you're so set on proving yourself innocent of criminal activity, you're just making me more suspicious. An innocent doesn't feel the need to prove anything so strongly. He'd say search me. Then search me, Chief. Evan growled, adjusting his ice pack. I haven't done anything wrong. Except try to take booze. Hiccup smirked. Admitting to your crimes. That's progress. Evan huffed. Please, I'm not turning into a Mr. Goody Two-Boots like your perfect posse. So you go the opposite direction? Hiccup asked, rubbing toothless scales. Okay, if there was a gang, hypothetically, what would be the point in destroying people's property? Hiccup shrugged. I've been asking myself that question for weeks. And you've still got no answers. Maybe it's just a couple drunks causing problems for the heck of it. What makes you think it's a gang? Drunks aren't that coordinated and they don't escape that flawlessly. 4 months on end, no less. Less hands make light work. Yes, but a team can get more done, more effectively. That's stupid. They'd get caught with more people. Unless they had an inside job. Evan frowned and fidgeted in his seat. Huh. Hiccup shrugged. Hypothetically. You think they have an insider? Hiccup fought to keep his face neutral. Well, how else would they know about my guards' schedules? I've gone through a lot of trouble to catch these people and it's been months. I've had to cut back on my midnight watches because my people are worn out. Whoever their informant is must be pretty sneaky because this gang has been on top of everything. Hiccup sighed in exasperation. Evan murmured, pondering the information. Hiccup watched him carefully. Phase 1, false information planted. Of course, he was making adjustments to his plans, but he wasn't going to tell Evan exactly what. Now it was time for Phase 2. You know, you would really be doing yourself a favor by helping me out. Evan's thoughtful expression vanished and he glared once more. Not gonna happen, Chief. No, hear me out. Hiccup held out a placating hand. Answer me one question, just one, and I'll let you go. Evan blinked in confusion. Let me go. But. Unless you'd rather answer a question and sit in a jail cell. You'd let me go. Why? Evan asked. You know I'm guilty. Of stealing. Attempted stealing. Hiccup forced himself to stay relaxed. He was so anxious to get answers and he could feel Evan's resolve crumbling, but he couldn't show it. If Evan realized he was being played to the exact spot he was wanted, he'd shut down. Because I'm a firm believer in second chances, Hiccup replied calmly. If I can give someone a chance to prove himself trustworthy, I'll do it. Just remember that next time, I won't be so gracious. Evan chewed his lip, clearly thinking. Hiccup knew he was giving the teen a clean slate. The council wouldn't like it, but he had to get answers. He was getting desperate. It was only a matter of time before someone got hurt and property damages would be the least of his worries. I'll tell ya what, Hiccup conceded. You answer one question, I'll let you go and I'll talk to your boss about keeping your job. Evan's eyes widened. Hiccup didn't know Evan very well, but he did know his family. His father wanted his boys to have a job. An unruly teen with a criminal record would have a hard time finding a job, especially if said teen was part of a gang of unruly teens, like Hiccup suspected. Evan's greedy expression to take advantage of the offer was only reinforcing the chief's suspicions. Evan glanced between Hiccup and the doorway, and nervously swallowed. One question. 1. Evan glanced at the doorway again. Hiccup vaguely wondered if the teen suspected the gang to charge in at any second and beat him to a bloody pulp for toying with his proposal. Finally, Evan leaned forward. Okay, fine. But don't tell anyone it was me. Who would I? Hiccup stopped himself. He had one question and teenagers were unruly. One accidental inquiry and Evan might take that as his one question. He had to make it count. Hiccup rubbed his face and paused, thinking. Looking at the teen, he finally settled on one question. Who's the leader? Evan's eyes widened like saucers and he shook his head. No. Next question. Hiccup's eyes narrowed and Evan looked away. Either the teen was afraid of the leader or he really didn't want Hiccup to know. Maybe both. He slowly exhaled. Fine. Where's the hideout? Evan winced and shook his head. Hiccup couldn't help but smile. Part of the agreement should have been to actually answer the one question he asked. Okay. He thought again. How many kids are in the group? Who said it was kids? Hiccup felt his patience wavering. Answer the question, please. Evan bit his lip. More than 10. Less than 15. Hiccup deflated inside, but nodded once. It wasn't exactly what he'd been looking for, but he really had gleaned loads of information. He gestured for Evan's wrists and pulled out a key. After unlocking the shackles, he waved the teen off. You're free to go. Seriously? Evan asked nervously. Don't make me regret this, Evan. Hiccup frowned. Next time, I won't be so forgiving. Toothless snarled, making Evan jump. The chief nodded toward the doorway once more and the teenager bolted. Chief and Dragon watched him go until the doors slammed. Hiccup huffed and rubbed his face. Moments later he heard footsteps and felt her sit on the bench next to him. Why did you do that? Astrid asked. You let him go. Hiccup clasped his hands in front of his mouth and shook his head. We need answers, Astrid. Someone's going to get hurt and we can't risk that. Yes, but you let a suspect go. He's naive. Anyone naive deserves at least one chance. Only time will tell if he makes wise choices. Hiccup replied. Like I said, next time I won't be so forgiving. I know. Astrid sighed, rubbing his arm. Do you think it'll work? Do I hope he'll take the false information to the rest of the gang? Yes. Let's just hope they're stupid enough to try something. By tripling the nightly watch by man and dragon, we should hopefully catch them. And if we don't, they can't hide forever. It has to be kids and no kids are that organized forever. They're going to slip up somewhere and when they do, we'll be waiting. The couple sat in silence for several minutes, pondering the situation. Hiccup looked at her sideways. What did you do with Kale and Free? Separated them. Kale's in the back and Free's toward the front. I didn't want them talking. Didn't get anything out of them. No. Stiff as boards. And I've never liked Kale but, wow. I don't know how Snotlout and Heather tolerate it. They don't. They kicked him out. Hiccup. They helped him find a house because he was better off living alone. Astrid. They kicked him out. Whether they did it nicely or not, they kicked him out. Fine, fine. He doesn't seem to care much either way. Nope. Astrid sighed and slung her leg across his lap. Hiccup glanced down and massaged her calf muscle as they talked. Now what? Her husband shrugged. Let's gather the council. We need to talk. Astrid nodded in agreement, but neither of them moved. Hiccup looked over at her and gave her a small smile. I love you. Astrid smiled and cupped his face in her hands. I love you too, Chief. She kissed him slowly and tenderly in a way that made his heart leap. In the back of his mind, he remembered their conversation a few weeks ago and wished he had the time to just take a day off and spend it with her. She'd been strong for him for so long and for once he wanted to make her feel loved. They hadn't had a date in months and most nights he wasn't able to come home until late. He was about to deepen the kiss when she pulled away, breathing heavily. That's enough of that. Hiccup frowned. Why, he whispered and pulled her closer. We don't do that often enough. Because we have more important things to do right now. Nothing is more important than my wife. I need to stop acting like it. Well. Astrid rolled her eyes lightly. True. Very true. But, not now. Besides, we're in the hall. There are witnesses. She glanced toward the bar area where the workers were glancing over and whispering amongst themselves. Hiccup snorted and pushed her leg off his legs. Standing, he yelled over, no worries ladies and gents, we will not subject you to such horrors today. A few workers snickered. One man waved him off with a spatula. It's all good. I was just about to offer you guys the pantry. And that's my cue to leave. Hiccup walked to the door hastily, the workers' laughter echoing behind them. He snickered at Astrid's blush as they walked outside. Just like old times. Oh, shut up. Toothless bounded down the stairs ahead of them. All right, I'll gather everyone at the square. Okay, I'll head to the fishery. As she ran down the stairs, Hiccup glanced at the storm clouds overhead and patted Toothless' head. Come on, bud. We need to be quick. Dragon and Ryder flew into the square minutes later and landed on a rooftop overlooking the surrounding buildings. Within minutes, he spied Gobber, Fishlegs, Horst and a few other council members. Climbing across the rooftops, Toothless followed Hiccup's direction until he caught Fishlegs' attention. Hiccup subtly tapped his ear twice, adjusted a strap on his armor, and snapped Toothless' landing gear wide open. Fishlegs gave a subtle nod and made his way toward the others. Hiccup urged Toothless into the air and flew back toward the Great Hall to wait for them. The wind blowing in his face, he gazed up at the skies and sighed. If a storm wasn't brewing, he'd have done some crazy flying while they waited for the council. But it would be foolhardy to do so. As if reading his thoughts, Toothless huffed sadly. I know, bud. We'll go soon. Hiccup patted his side. Hopefully. He really needed to take 2 days off, one for Astrid, one for Toothless. He didn't want to wait until he was retired. Finn wasn't quite ready to be chief yet. The chief waited for 20 minutes for the council to meet. People trickled in one by one through the various entrances that led to the Great Hall, some dripping from the rain outside. Few people knew about the secret entrances. Hiccup had realized early on that if the gang did have any insiders, it would be better for the council to meet as secretly as possible. He knew some of his friends had been pretty good at sneaking around in the shadows back in the day. Today's young generation could probably do it just as easily. It was possible they were being watched at any time. Astrid took her seat at his right as Hiccup watched everyone take their seats at the large, round table. Rough Nut, Fishlegs, and Tough Nut sat on the other side of Astrid. Next were Snotlout and Gobber. Horst and Manny the Mad, keeper of the winery and weaponry, sat across from him. Mara, Mulch and Bucket were the final few to take their seats. This wasn't the entire council, but it did consist of the most important people. These were Hiccup's closest confidants on the council. They'd keep the other council members informed, of course. But for urgent information, all it took was a simple signal from Hiccup to call a meeting. Hiccup waited patiently for conversations to die down before he began speaking. Thanks for coming on such short notice, everyone. A few of you are already aware, but I wanted to inform you that we caught 3 boys trying to steal alcohol today. In broad daylight. Horst asked. Fools. Manny the Mad scowled. Who was it? We'll get to that. Hiccup nodded. But I have good reason to believe that they're also part of the gang. Heads perked and whispers broke out around the table. Did you get information out of them? Gobber asked. Hiccup's head swayed as he thought. Yes and no, I know for sure it's a group of kids, more than 10 and less than 15. That's a vague number. Fishlegs scratched his cheek. How'd you get that answer? Hiccup sighed. I had to make a deal with one of them. If he answered one question, I'd let him go. Almost instantly, the room burst into argument. Why would you? Hiccup. Trying to catch these riffraff for months and finally. Ridiculous. Can we blow him up? Could you trust someone to not go back to the gang? Was it? I demand to know. Hiccup waited calmly for the outbursts to die down. When he thought he could be heard, he said, I asked who the leader was and about their hideout, but he refused. That was the only question he would answer, so I had to take it. I couldn't go back on my deal. If he goes back, he goes back. But I don't think he will, except to warn them. I think I scared him well enough. Who was it? Manny growled. Hiccup winced. Evan. Manny's face began to turn purple. Manny. He broke into my shop. I gave him a job and this is how he repays me. 4 months on end, I might add. Snotlout added. Snotlout, not helping. Manny, I told him that if he helped me, I'd help him. He gets to keep his job. The elderly man jumped out of his chair. What? Manny. This is an outrage. It's my business. Remember your position, Mumford. Hiccup interrupted with a firm voice. What's more important, your wine business or keeping our people safe? If I had to make a deal with a 17-year-old, that makes all of us cringe, but if it gets us closer to ending this situation entirely, isn't it worth it? Maybe giving the kid a second chance will even teach him to choose wiser friends. You can't protect everyone, Hiccup. Horst replied calmly. Second chances are good and gracious, but sometimes it's better to hang on to your fish before throwing it back into the water. We still have Free and Kale. Hiccup watched the council tense at the mentions. A few people glanced at Snotlout, who made no comment. Kale and Free would be much more valuable to the gang, I think. I got information out of the talkative one and gave him back. We're going to end this one way or another, and if Evan is there when we catch them, then he'll get charged twice. I made myself very clear to him. So what's your plan then? Tough Nut asked. Can we still blow up their hideout when we find it? I'd prefer to avoid fatalities, Tough. Hiccup stood and paced around the table. I want to triple the guard. Great Hall, Fishery, Forge, Academy, you name it, I want it covered. If anyone under the age of 18 is outside after dark, I want their names. Any suspicious activity comes to me. Hiccup, we've been doing this Horst side. And we're wearing the guards out. They need a break. Fishlegs agreed. I know, Hiccup sighed. Which is why I'm taking shifts too. Astrid frowned. Hiccup. No, I can't force people to do this and expect to rest myself. We're all working overtime if we want to end this. Anyone with children, teenagers especially, should stay home to make sure they are still home at night. Sorry, Astrid. So we're working overtime, Rough Nut said as she dug a knife into the table. Are we just hoping that they'll be stupid enough to come out? Hiccup smirked. I told Evan that we've cut back on night watches. Snotlout snorted. Oh ho ho, you are so sly. Yep. Wait, Tough Nut paused. But you just told us to triple the watch. Hiccup nodded. But if you told them there are less people watching and then they try to hit some place, oh. Exactly. Hiccup nodded. Honestly, I didn't think it would be so easy to plant false information, but, well, Evan's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. No. No, he is not. Manny huffed. Hiccup faced him. Give him a test, Manny. Or make him sharpen weapons for a week. Do whatever you want with him by way of punishment. I just told him he could keep his job. You make him pay for his mistakes in whatever way you want. Manny's face stretched into a sinister grin. Just remember who his father is. Daddy can kiss my grits. Mumford grumbled. That kid's mine. Hiccup snickered. Snotlout twisted in his chair. What are you going to do with Free and Kale? We're going to hang on to them. Hiccup glanced at the ceiling when thunder boomed overhead. Keep questioning, though I'm not sure if they'll give us anything. Kale won't, Snotlout huffed. He's about immovable as a canyon wall. And Free's fiercely loyal to him, Astrid agreed. We could give them some hard labor for a few weeks as punishment. Maybe cleaning out the dragon stalls or scrubbing the academy. Yeah, the academy would be go. Hiccup choked and froze. Everyone stared at him in surprise. Astrid began to stand. Hiccup. He turned to her with wide, grief-stricken eyes. The academy. I was supposed to meet Addie. Oh gods, I was supposed to meet her over an hour ago. Go. Astrid shooed him. Go find her, I'll finish here. Argh, why me? Why me? Hiccup muttered as he ran to the door. Toothless, come on. Man and dragon disappeared into the clearing sky. Astrid sighed and plopped into her seat. She shook her head in annoyance, staring at the table. Rough Nut touched her shoulder. Everything okay? Audrey finally asked him to do something with her. Their first daddy-daughter date in years. Astrid murmured. And he missed it. Everyone sighed or simpered. It's all right, Astrid shook her head. It wasn't your fault. It was the gang's. He just got distracted. We've got to catch them for a number of reasons. It's interfering with everything. Adriana was a little bit early. She honestly couldn't help it, she was excited. Hiccup had seemed anxious to spend time with her, which, in her experience, meant that he had something fun planned. Then again, Hiccup and Adriana had been known for coming up with fun activities in seconds. They were no strangers to spontaneity. Lily touched down in the academy at 5 to 3. To let out a bit of nervous energy, they did a few laps around the arena before landing, which made Adriana feel rather dizzy. She wasn't sure how Hiccup and Toothless could spin around all day without feeling the need to sit down and rest for a moment. This was a good idea, she said as she sat against the monstrous nightmare's back. We haven't done anything with our boys in ages. She stared out at the wide arena with interest. A chalkboard was propped against the wall on one side and there were a few maps and benches all around the place. Most of the equipment was stored where the dragons used to be imprisoned. This left the arena wide open for drills and early flying lessons. Claw and burn marks covered the walls, making the girl wonder what it had been like when the arena was home to dragon killing exercises. She knew that there was leftover equipment from those days that had been changed into flying exercises and last resort dragon containment devices. But she certainly couldn't imagine being left to fend for herself with nothing but a shield with wild dragons shooting flames at her. She'd have been hopeless at it, probably more hopeless than Hiccup had been at first. Thank the gods those days were over, because she knew there was no way she would be cut out for a life full of dragon raids and attacks and fighting lessons. Even watching Gobber's dragon dentistry made her feel a bit squeamish. Was she really related to a man known for beheading a dragon shortly after birth? She looked over at a reflective object used to distract terrors. Her distinctly feminine face stared back. Not a trace of Stoic the Vast anywhere, unless one was to count the features she shared with Hiccup. Those were quite a bit more obvious. Aside from almost identical eyes, she shared several subtle features which had once prompted Gobber to tell her that she and Hiccup could have been mistaken for twins had they grown up together. How ironic that she and her actual twin didn't look even the tiniest bit similar. It was a few minutes before she became uncomfortably aware that her father hadn't turned up. Adriana scanned the sky with her eyes, seeking the familiar outline of the Night Fury and the Dragon Whisperer himself. But the sky remained cloudy and devoid of any dragon or dragon rider at all. Hiccup was late. The Haddock girl sighed and reached for the book in her satchel. Her father was an important man, so it wouldn't be fair to blow up at him for showing up a few minutes later than expected. At the very least, he would send a terror to let her know he was on his way. The moment her eyes met the page, she was sucked into the world of the story. This was a particularly good one about people who could control the elements. Just as she was sympathizing with the poor cabbage merchant whose stands had been unceremoniously knocked over, again, a raindrop landed on the parchment. The girl looked into the sky just as the rain picked up its pace. She shoved her book in her satchel and stood up quickly, knowing full well that this could turn into a torrential downpour at any given moment. Sure enough, the moment she and Lily were ready to take off, sheets of rain obscured their vision. Girl and dragon immediately rushed into an open cage filled with large pieces of equipment that made perfectly good seating for the time being. The reality hit Adriana a few minutes after she and Lily had taken shelter in the cage. It had to be at least 4:30 and her father had neither showed up nor sent a terror explaining his situation. Her heart clenched. Her father had forgotten about her. There was no other explanation. It wasn't like Hiccup didn't usually show up where he was needed, no, he simply hadn't deemed their time together not important enough to remember. At this point, she didn't even know what to feel anymore. A part of her wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Another part wanted to track him down and scream at him for the whole village to hear. But she'd never have the nerve to do that if she was actually in the middle of the square. All she could do was tremble with a suppressed emotion she couldn't even place. Good gods, came a voice just outside the cage. Adriana looked up just in time to see another teenager running in, a changeling at his heels. He was soaking wet and comfortingly familiar. Brandine. The boy looked up and gave Adriana a lopsided smile. And my day just got a lot better. Which isn't saying too much since the bloody rain kind of spoiled it. He scowled at the outside as if to berate it for not acting the way he wanted it to act. Adriana shrugged. Good for the trees. Didn't know you were a tree hugger. Brandine quipped, winking cheekily at her. Actually, he added as he took in his surroundings, what are you doing here? Weird time to be at the academy. Well, I was meeting my dad here. Adriana admitted, crossing her arms to warm herself up. What about you? I was flying and the heavens opened up and dumped freezing water on me. Brandine shook his head in a disapproving manner, as if the weather had thrown a very noisy tantrum. This was the closest shelter. Sid flopped down on his stomach and rested his head in his claws. It seemed the rain would persist for a while longer if the dragons were making themselves comfortable. What an inconvenience, being trapped in here with you. Adriana smirked. Worst day ever. Brandine played along with a grin. So why are you upset? I'm not. Come on, the anguish is written all over your face. Brandine sat down next to her and stretched his arms wide in both directions. It's so easy to read you, Nani. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Adriana sighed, noticing that his left arm had now settled inches from her back. It's no big deal though. Ah, of course not. That's why you're in the arena at a weird time of day waiting for someone who hasn't shown up. Brandine nodded and gave her a facetiously sympathetic glance. Okay, so it is a big deal. Adriana huffed, balling her fists. He said he'd come and he didn't. No note, nothing. What kind of dad does that? Brandine looked down at his lap and went very silent. A moment later, he spoke up in a soft voice. I guess, one who's still around to make those kinds of promises. Guilt flooded the Haddock girl as if a dam in her heart had suddenly been opened wide. She didn't know anything about Brandine's father. She'd met his mother plenty of times, but neither of them had ever alluded to the idea that Brandine had a second parent at all. She hadn't given this much thought, but she was starting to sense that there was a story behind it and she was about to hear it. I'm sorry, she mumbled. I didn't. I forgot. Hey, it's fine. Brandine lifted his head and smiled at her. You didn't know. I didn't know how to tell you, how to tell anyone, really. About your dad. Yeah. Brandine sighed deeply. Adriana shook her head. You don't have to tell me. I really like you, Nani. Brandine's arm inched closer to her back. You deserve to know. Silence permeated the containment unit once more. Adriana felt nervous, like she was about to learn something dangerous. Finally, Brandine spoke up again. My father was a great man, he said in a voice wrought with emotion. He and my mom weren't married, but that didn't stop him from being active in my life. He'd come by often just to check up on me, train me in things he deemed important for me to learn. He was well respected in our tribe. So? Adriana dry swallowed, her heart thumping with dread over what she was about to hear. What happened? When I was 7, he and another man had a disagreement. He tried to settle it without violence, but the man refused. Brandine's voice shook with anger. My father was murdered. And the man who killed him just walked away. What? Adriana gasped. Why wasn't the man brought to justice? I don't know. Brandine hissed through his teeth. Maybe he bought his way out of it. Or he's got friends in high places. Either way, one day I'm going to find him. What will you do then? Adriana asked, leaning forward. Brandine glanced sideways at her. I don't know yet. I'm still sort of thinking about it. Well, don't stoop to his level. Adriana leaned in some more. Killing him won't change anything. Oh, I'm not going to kill him. Brandine smiled wistfully. I wouldn't do that. He sounds ruthless. Adriana gritted her teeth, anger surging within her. What kind of man would kill someone in cold blood? A father, no less. A coward. Brandine pursed his lips. That's all he was. A coward. Who was he, your father? Adriana was barely aware that she was now leaning against her friend in her eagerness to hear the rest of the story. His name was Dirk. Brandine replied with a small smile. Dirk the Daring. He was a dragon killer when he was my age, but that was before your father met Toothless. Apparently he was really something. And he became an even better rider. Sounds like a great man. Adriana smiled at him. And he'd probably be proud of you. Oh, I know he would. Brandine agreed. Mom says I remind her of him sometimes. Little things I do, I guess. Just like you, Nani. You and your dad are a lot alike. So I've heard. Adriana said with a scowl. That's a good thing. Brandine nudged her shoulder. You're both a bit too clever for your own good sometimes. And you kind of talk like him. Brilliant. We can argue using the same inflections. Adriana grumbled. Brandine breathed a laugh. That you can argue at all is a blessing. Don't take him for granted, Nani. I want to see you two make up. The closer you two get, the better I'll feel. Why is that? Brandine shrugged. I guess I like to see fathers bond with their kids. Makes me feel a bit closer to my dad. So you think I should make up with him? Adriana sighed. But he didn't show up. He's not perfect. But neither are you. I guess it's hereditary, now isn't it? Brandine nudged her more forcefully this time, making her giggle. Come on, you know I'm right. I'm always right. Sure you are. Adriana deadpanned. Always with the sarcasm. Brandine rolled his eyes. Must be a haddock thing. Well, you must be an honorary haddock then. Adriana stuck her tongue out at his jokingly outraged expression. They were silent for a moment, merely enjoying the company of each other. But then something Brandine had said before popped into the haddock girl's mind. So, you really like me, she mumbled bashfully, heat rising to her face. Brandine reached over and placed his arm around her shoulders. Yes. I do, he whispered in her ear. I like you a lot. You mean it? Adriana breathed, her heart pounding a tattoo against her chest. You're beautiful, smart, creative, sweet, what's not to like? Brandine's face was very close to hers. Well, you're in luck. Adriana smiled shyly at him. I like you too. Good. Brandine rested his forehead against hers. Otherwise what I'm about to do would be really weird. What? Adriana inhaled rapidly at the sensation of his hand resting on her cheek. What are you about to do? This. The Anderson boy leaned in until their lips met. Adriana's breath hitched in her throat. This was a new sensation. She thought briefly that it was odd how the same act between two different people could feel so, well, different. Brandine's lips moved against hers confidently, his head turned at exactly the right angle. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he wanted. There was something comforting about being the intended recipient of his affections. It felt like he had been planning this moment for a long time. Before she was fully aware of what she was doing, she leaned in to deepen the kiss. It was an incredible sensation, being kissed by the handsome boy who caught the eyes of the girls around town. To be noticed, to be cared about, to be kissed by him, Adriana could scarcely believe what was happening. How long it was before they separated was anyone's guess. It could have been seconds or hours. Adriana honestly didn't care. Her heart was beating so hard, she could scarcely breathe without its drumming interrupting her breaths. Brandine stared at her, adoration in his eyes and his fingers still resting on her cheek. Wow, the girl breathed. That was good, I hope. Brandine grinned. To tell him it had been good would have been a massive understatement. Adriana nodded shakily. Brandine's dark blue eyes flitted to the arena. Sun's out again, he whispered. We should talk. About this. Adriana stammered. I can't think of a better way to spend the evening. Brandine slowly stood up and reached his hand out. Want to go for a walk? Adriana nodded and allowed him to help her stand up. One of his hands wrapped around hers and she was instantly intrigued at how enveloped her hand was in his. His hands were massive, much bigger than she'd been expecting. And he had to be at least a full foot taller than her. She'd have to stand on tiptoe to kiss him, and even then, he'd have to bend down. There was something oddly romantic about that prospect, and had Brandine not started walking while holding her hand, she'd have stood rooted to the spot, contemplating these things until nightfall. Nani, this is the beginning of something amazing. I can feel it. Brandine proclaimed cheerfully. You are an incredible girl. Adriana felt like her voice had stopped working altogether, but she nodded, her heart leaping with excitement. What had started out as a horrible day had taken a turn for the better, all right. And, for the first time in a long while, she couldn't wait to see what the future held for her as long as Brandine was at her side. Evan threw open Mildew's door and nearly knocked Morgan to the floor. She squealed in surprise at the sweaty, smelly boy hunched over, gasping for air. Finn cocked his head in surprise. Evan. Where's Kale and Free? What took so long? They're in jail. Evan panted. Morgan gasped. What? The other teenagers went silent and Finn stiffened. What? It was your mom. She caught us at the winery. And you escaped. Ye well know. Your dad had us in jail, and then he took me aside for questioning, but I guess out of the goodness of his heart, he let me go. Finn's eyes widened as Thorin jumped out of his chair. Finn ran to the door and slammed it shut. What did you say to him? What did you say? Eric watched as Thorin and Jackie checked out the few windows, presumably looking for guards coming to arrest them. For once he wished he'd brought Charger. I didn't. Evan cried, jerking away from the haddock air. I didn't tell him anything about us. My father doesn't let people off the hook for nothing, he's too smart for that. He's a softie, but he doesn't hand out free tickets out of jail for nothing. All right, he asked who the leader was and where the hideout was, but I refused to answer those. Evan cried. He wouldn't let me go without answering a question, so I told him we had more than 10 people, less than 15. I didn't give names, I didn't say genders. Nothing. That's all he got out of me. Yeah, Finn nodded patronizingly. Until the cavalry shows up on the forest line, because he probably sent people after you. Nobody followed me. Shut your trap, Evan. Finn muttered. Everybody get out of here, buddy system. Eric, you're with me, newbie. I prefer to be alone. That won't look suspicious. Eric gave him a flat look. How often do you see me being social? Finn opened his mouth and then bobbed his head to the side in agreement. Fine then. Remember what I told you. Keep moving, don't look back, stay strong, yada yada. I'll be fine. Eric pushed out the door and jogged toward the trees. He kept moving and didn't look back. What he found in the village was interesting, villagers milling about, all discussing the latest arrest. People sounded hopeful. Maybe the raids and vandalism would stop. Maybe they were the only ones attacking. Maybe it wasn't a gang at all. For a moment, Eric felt guilty that he was a wolf wearing sheep's clothing, and he was right in the pasture. Whose home and property and well-being would he be told to attack? Whose life was he about to make difficult? He shook his head and reminded himself of Finn's words. Keep moving. Don't look back. Stay strong. That's the only way to survive. He didn't have to fake a smile or pretend to be happy, he wasn't after all. Nobody would be questioning him, not as a suspect or to ask his opinion. Nobody noticed him pushing through the crowd, boots sliding in the mud, and feeling just as alone as ever. Chapter 11, The Strategist. Chapter text. Hiccup traipsed back to the house with a heavy heart. A part of him wanted to punch another wall or tree, but he held back the urge as best he could. Now wasn't the time for angry outbursts. He was already dreading what he'd find when he got there, but he knew one thing, it wouldn't be pretty. His moment of shame would have to wait, apparently. Adriana either wasn't home or hadn't bothered to light any of the lanterns in the main room. Her bedroom windows faced the back of the house, so he couldn't tell if she was there or not just by looking at the front. He hopped off his dragon and reached out to open the door when his hand faltered over the handle. Toothless made a concerned cooing noise at his human's rigid form. I don't know what to do, but... Hiccup mumbled morosely. I really messed up this time. He let his hand fall to his side as his head drooped. Toothless gently pushed his snout beneath Hiccup's fingers. Hiccup half-heartedly patted him, feeling the tiniest bit of relief. There was something comforting about a dragon's affection when he was feeling particularly miserable. A tiny spark of anger ignited within him and he stomped down the front steps, choosing instead to pace in front of the house. "I was stupid," he said emphatically to the dragon, who was watching his movements with interest. "When you make a promise to be somewhere, you're supposed to show up. I'm the chief of the hooligans, you'd think I'd have this down by now." Hiccup's pacing was getting more rapid, his arms gesturing wildly around his head. Toothless' head moved back and forth so he could watch his rider's every move. "But when it concerns my own daughter, my whole brain seems to shut off. It's like the universe doesn't want her and me to reconcile, ever." Hiccup grabbed fistfuls of his hair as he paced, his breathing quite audible as he began to wear himself out. "She can only handle so much rejection, but she's just a kid, really. Barely younger than I was when you and I met, and you know what a basket case I was then." Toothless made a face at his human before pushing through the front door and disappearing into the house. "Great, even my dragon is sick of me." Hiccup mumbled under his breath before following the Night Fury into the house. "Toothless, what are you? Would you hold still?" The dragon snuffled irritably at Hiccup before leaping up the stairs. Before Hiccup could catch him, he had bounded down the hallway to Adriana's bedroom and roared at the door. "Stop!" Hiccup scampered over to his dragon and tried to get between him and the door. "She's probably not even." The door opened and a still fully dressed Adriana stood in the doorway, staring between her father and his dragon with confusion. "Home," Hiccup finished lamely. He straightened up and turned around to face his daughter. "Hi." Adriana's eyebrows raised the tiniest fraction. "Hi." It was odd how flustered Hiccup felt at being faced with one of his own family members. After all, he'd changed this girl's diapers once. One would think making conversation would be the least of his worries. But familial relationships are never as simple as they seem. Hiccup and Adriana were certainly learning that the hard way. The father's resolve finally broke. "Gods, Adriana, I am so sorry," he exclaimed almost mournfully. "We caught a couple people trying to steal from the winery, and you know we've been looking for those responsible for all the vand." "It's okay," Adriana interrupted. Hiccup froze mid-syllable and stared his daughter. Did she really just brush it aside as if he'd merely forgotten to take out the garbage? He knew she could be forgiving, but even he would have been upset if he'd been in her situation. What? It's fine. I found something else to do anyway," Adriana said with a shrug. Hiccup raised an eyebrow. "You know, it's okay to be upset. I broke my promise. Do you want me to be upset?" "No." "Well. No. Hiccup took a deep breath to try to organize his thoughts. "I just thought you would be." "Well, I'm not." Adriana gave him a half-hearted smile. "Things happen. I won't try to waste any more of your time." "No, no," Hiccup exclaimed, throwing a hand out to keep the girl from shutting her door. "I really do want to spend time with you. It's important to me. I can tell." Adriana deadpanned in a very familiar fashion that would have amused Hiccup had he not been emotionally compromised. "Look, things come up." It was a dreadful excuse and Hiccup knew it, but he pressed on. "I would rather have spent the day with you. I mean it." "Okay, so we'll reschedule once everything dies down." Adriana nodded, half-hearted smile still plastered to her face. "I'm not sure that'll be any time soon." Hiccup sighed and withdrew his hand from the door. "But I'll try. I'll give you as much time as I can." "Okay." Adriana shrugged again. "Well, I want to get back to my book." "Night, Dad." The door shut before Hiccup had a chance to respond. "Right." He hung his head. "Night, Addy." Despite his growing weariness, Hiccup felt alert. Gazing across the filled great hall during the busiest time of the morning, the breakfast hour, he made a few mental notes. It pleased him to see the various council members mingling, as per usual, but he knew otherwise, they too were keeping their eyes and ears open. They were just as compelled as him to catch the gang members as soon as possible. Astrid caught his eye from across the room, pausing in her conversation with Heather to give him a warm smile. He smiled back and watched her focus back on Heather. Still, they hadn't had any free time to spend together alone. He felt horrible about that. The more time that passed since she first mentioned it, the more the thought nagged at him. But he couldn't just drop his duties. His wife was definitely a top priority, but sadly catching the gang, along with his other chiefly duties, had to take precedence. Hiccup could barely remember crashing face first into his pillow last night. Or rather, early morning. As promised, he took the first night watch with Fish Legs. Astrid poked him awake around 7 for his first morning meeting, to which he could barely haul himself out of bed. He was running himself into the ground and he knew it, but if anything exciting happened on a night watch, he wanted to be the first at the scene. But one look in the mirror told him just how much of a zombie he was turning into. Thank Thor for coffee. As if on cue, a solid poke on the shoulder snapped him out of his daze. You look tired. The chief glanced at Snotlout and sighed. That's an understatement. You and Astrid need a Vaki. Pronto. Hiccup chuckled. Another understatement. As soon as this gang nonsense is behind us, we're shipping you two off. Snotlout straightened. No kids, no responsibilities, all that jazz. Thanks, but even when we do catch them, we have to go through the trials and all that jazz. Hiccup sighed wearily. The thought's nice though. Snotlout snorted. Astrid's going to corner you one of these days, and she isn't going to let you say no. Hiccup fought a smirk but managed to reply, she knows I'm busy. And soon enough she's going to be fed up and will start occupying you with other. Okay. Hiccup waved his hands frantically. There are kids nearby, sheesh. Snotlout shrugged. Their fault for eavesdropping. Hiccup dropped his forehead into his palm. Some things never change. Looks like Larson's made a friend. The chief followed his friend's line of sight and his eyebrows shot up in surprise. While he was pleased that Eric seemed to be mingling and branching out, he wasn't entirely sure Finn was the best choice. Not that Hiccup had any serious qualms with Eric hanging out with his son, but Finn and Eric were polar opposites. Finn was loud and obnoxious, proud and disrespectful to authority most of the time. Eric was typically quiet yet calculating, said his piece when he felt the need. He was creative and a pacifist in a way, much like himself. Eric wasn't one to bring out the fists if there was a disagreement. Finn craved those opportunities. Hiccup hummed noncommittally. Kinda weird. Hiccup shrugged. At least he's sitting with someone. At least he's eating, more like. Snotlout shook his head. I'm not typically one to worry about other people's kids, but he's a nice guy. I hate to see him fend for himself. Yeah. Lara's a piece of work sometimes. Hiccup glanced at the woman from the other side of the room, chatting with a few other ladies. I had wanted to talk to him on a more frequent basis after the accident. But Hiccup winced. He didn't want to make excuses. I gotcha. He'll probably be fine, mingling is the first step to getting better. With Finn? Hiccup asked. Don't be so pessimistic. Snotlout punched his shoulder. At least he's out of the house. In public. At a table with teenagers, popular teenagers. Hiccup blinked, looking back at the table. He looked just in time to see a girl named Jackie sit beside Eric, who was across from Finn. His son and the girl exchanged a few quick words before the girl stood and marched to another table. Neither teen looked upset nor agitated at all, but clearly Finn had told her to leave. Eric had watched the exchange with a bland expression as he picked at his food, favoring his left hand more than his right. Hiccup curiously noted his wrapped forearms, but made no comment to Snotlout on the matter. Keep an eye on those two. Hiccup finally said. Two. Not Eric. Well, yes. I don't want to assume he's not involved. I just don't distrust him like. Hiccup faltered, struggling for words. Snotlout lowered his voice. Do you suspect Finn? I can't rule him out. What about Adriana? Hiccup looked across the room at his daughter, sitting side by side with Brandine and talking with Taryn. Adriana had her hair in a loose braid today and wore a leather headband, similar to what Astrid wore when they were teenagers. She laughed at something Taryn said and nudged Brandine with her shoulder. He finally shook his head. I would be shell-shocked if she was part of it. It's just not her. I agree. Snotlout nodded. I mean, still we probably can't rule anyone out, but I would be just as shocked. It would be nice if we could narrow it down to just a few, but there are dozens of teenagers on Berk. Hiccup sighed. It would be nicer if that retard brother-in-law of mine would just spill the beans and save us the trouble. Now that I could drink too. Whoa, you. Drink. Really? Snotlout gasped. If we get Kale to spill, ale's on you. Hiccup smirked. Done, but he won't. Oh, we'll see about that. Snotlout marched away. Hey. Snotlout turned to catch Hiccup's warning glance. No torture. Snotlout pouted and pinched his thumb and forefinger together. Just a little. No. Pretty please. No. I'll bring you the best wine in the archipelago. Gobber's specialty. You already bring the wine, Snotlout. Hey. I said you arg, you know what? Forget it. Hiccup waved him off. Shoofly, I got stuff to do. Shoofly you. Hiccup snickered as he walked away, swiping a glass of juice from a tray as he went. He wasn't sure if spiking his blood sugar on orange juice was a better remedy to fix grogginess than caffeine, but he decided he didn't care. After downing the juice and sliding the empty glass toward the bartender, he whistled for Toothless and headed toward the doors. He smiled at a few children that charged past him, chasing a terrible terror. Just before reaching the doors, he caught sight of Finn and Eric deep in conversation. Something didn't sit right about the strange interaction. But without a good reason to butt in now, he decided to log away the information for a more suitable time, if the time came. That was really stupid. What? Her coming over here or me sending her away? Both. Eric griped, chopping a sausage just to occupy himself. She was stupid to come over here because we know we're probably being watched, but you sending her away probably made it worse. Finn shrugged indifferently. Maybe. $10 says my dad didn't even notice. Oh, he noticed, one way or another. Eric dropped his fork with a loud clink and rubbed his eyes. I honestly don't know how you've made it this long. My old man's not as quick as people make him out to be. No, your old man's better than that. Eric replied. He's got every square inch of this island crawling with soldiers. Evan said they're cutting back. Eric shook his head. I'm not buying that for a second. Hiccup would plant a twisted lie like that. So we can't see the guard. Finn waved a hand. It's more challenging that way. Suicide. Eric hissed. Finn snickered. You are really worked up about this. It's actually quite entertaining. And you are so gung-ho about it that one more slip-up like that will have all of us behind bars. Eric shot back. This isn't child's play anymore. Yes, I'm aware. Freaking out about it is surely going to catch their attention though, so relax. Finn pressed. Really, Chillax. Anyway, you're the smart one. What should we do next? Well, first, if we're smart, we'll stop meeting for a few days at least. Since they caught Kale and the guys yesterday, Hiccup's going to be like Toothless, ready to nab a cod at any given time. We have to lie low. Eric pulled out his pocket knife and began shaving wood off the table edge. Second, we shouldn't talk to Evan. They'll be watching him closely. I was thinking the same thing. If he comes to us, we boot him. More like the cold shoulder, Eric argued. Avoid him completely. I think that's the first time I've heard you condone that attitude. Hey, I don't want to go to jail just because I joined yesterday and he's an idiot. Eric hissed. Another wood shaving landed at his feet. Third, he looked up at Finn through his bangs. We're wearing masks from now on. Finn huffed. I was trying to avoid that. What? Why? Because it's evidence. Finn frowned. Besides, it's a better thrill when your face is exposed. Do you want your mom's axe thrown full force at you? I don't. This is my mom we're talking about. She'd throw it either way. While this is true, if they had gotten away, she knew who they were because they were exposed. Eric argued. I'm getting us masks. Finn blew air past his lips. Fine. Fourth. How much did you plan? You wanted a strategist, you got one. So shut up and listen. No wait, Finn interrupted again, clearly enjoying Eric's frustration. When did you have time for all this? Eric rolled his eyes. I think, Finn. I actually use my brain. Plus I didn't sleep much, so I pretty much thought all night. Finn nodded in approval. Dedicated. Thorough. Eric narrowed his eyes. Just goes to show how many things I found to improve in the little time I was with you guys. Finn scowled. Fourth. Eric hid a smirk. Since we won't be meeting in person for a while, I figured we could still message each other. I'll go to the council's terror center. Other messaging center. Think about it, I take a few terrors and tell them where to go. They know every inch of the island, who everyone is, and they are trained to burn messages after delivered and read. We could still communicate without being exposed. Finn thought for a few seconds in silence. Then Eric noticed him staring at Helga, who was standing across the room. Eric snapped his fingers in front of Finn's eyes, making the other boy jump. Yeah. That works. Eric looked at him flatly. Seriously, how had this kid not been caught yet? He sighed heavily. Right. I'll try to take care of that today sometime. During the day? Finn asked, still watching Helga from afar, but seemingly paying attention to the conversation. I've got nothing else to do. I can practice my stealth skills. Good luck, Blondie. Eric frowned, biting his tongue. Sure, the blonde hair was bright and easy to see, but at least he wasn't a big 6-foot galoot whose bright red hair could be spotted from the moon. But he assumed said big 6-foot galoot would not appreciate such terminology directed towards him. He wanted Finn's attention for this wide open, in the middle of the Great Hall, conversation, at the busiest time of the day, no less, but he probably didn't want his attention in that way. Or maybe. Eric thought harder. He'd noticed Hiccup and Snotlout watching them a few minutes ago. He knew it was suspicious. Finn had insisted on meeting here in the Great Hall while it was busy, so it would look less suspicious if they were talking in some secluded location. While the thought held some merit, Eric and Finn weren't exactly brothers as Cliff would put it. Hiccup's suspicions were high on everyone right now, he was sure of it. So meeting out in the open like buddies? Probably not a good idea. But if he could somehow upset Finn in some way, mildly of course, he'd probably get angry and stalk away like a small version of Stoic the Vast. He really didn't want Finn to make a scene though, so it would have to be subtle. Either way, if he made it obvious that he and Finn weren't on the best of terms, maybe he'd throw some suspicion off of himself a bit. What? At the end of the day, if they were all running from the guard to avoid capture, it was every man for himself in Eric's mind. Eric blinked out of his trance. The idea of actually running, or flying on Charger, away from Hiccup and the council, yikes, it was actually a scary thought. Was he a criminal now? Technically he'd only associated with the group thus far. He hadn't done anything wrong, even if he was making strategies. Finn acted like these were gold mines in comparison to their past work. Eric didn't think he was being that impressive. These ideas were merely the first things he'd thought of. He figured they were no-brainers. The 16-year-old thought about Kale and Free, currently sitting in jail. While Eric had already said they needed to lie low, he thought about the gang's past hits. Most were attacks on homes or businesses. What if they took it a step further? What if they struck the iron while it was hot? What if they really could fool the chief and the guard and the village? A thrilling sensation swooped through Eric as a plan formed in his mind. He realized just how much trouble he would be in if the plan failed. He realized how bad it would reflect on the Burke Guard and Hiccup if they succeeded. If they got caught. If they succeeded. Such a little word, so much interpretation. Suddenly, Eric felt the challenge. He didn't just have the idea, he couldn't wait to put it into action. He didn't want to lie low for a few days. He wanted to move. But first, Finn was still ogling Helga. He didn't seem to notice the silence or Eric's sudden spiked interest in criminal activity. So what about Kale and Free? Eric lightly broke the silence. Finn hummed. Finally he looked back at Eric like he was 1,000 times less gorgeous than Helga, which he probably was. What about them? I have a thought. Eric smirked, which got Finn's full attention. Eric quietly told him his plan. He watched Finn's face morph into masked eagerness. Clearly the other teen was trying his hardest to hide his excitement. It should only be me and the girls who pull it off though. Oh come on. Finn, they are going to check up on you. Eric frowned. If you want to go, fine, don't listen to my advice. You're the boss. But Hiccup's watching you too. Finn rolled his eyes. Whatever. It's a good plan. Where are they going to go though? Mildews. If they don't know about the hideout yet, then they can hide there. Afterward though, we will have to lie low. Probably. Oh my old man's gonna hate this. Finn noted with glee. For sure. I'll get the terrors as soon as I leave here and then I'll start gathering what we need. It shouldn't be difficult. Finn raised an eyebrow. Suddenly you're so interested. Eric shrugged. It's a good plan. Which could easily go wrong. Since when are you worried? Finn laughed. I'm not. But the first one's always the hardest. I'll be fine. Yes, I know. Finn straightened like a weekly meeting was finally closed. Well Wait, one more thing. Eric interrupted, leaning forward. Finn huffed. What now? Why do you hate your dad so much? Instantly, Finn's face darkened. He worked his jaw for a moment, then muttered, a lot of reasons. Is it worth all this trouble? Yes. Finn growled lowly. Every second of grief he gets from the things I cause are practically music to my ears. Now he'll know what it feels like. Eric ignored most of the questions floating through his mind, except one. What feels like? Being alone. Finn said through gritted teeth. Eric almost felt like his anger was being directed toward him. Feeling grief and anger at yourself for things that you can't fix when you know it's someone else causing the problems. Time doesn't heal all wounds like every adult will tell you. You know what I'm talking about. He did. Oh, he understood all right. Eric still couldn't sleep at night without thinking about his father and sister. While he tried to find it in his heart to let go of his anger toward Adriana for his father's death, Ouds was his fault. He couldn't necessarily relate to Finn on every level, but they shared a connection. But holding on to bitterness isn't always better either. Eric countered, feigning casual. It wasn't your dad's fault. Don't even go there. Finn hissed. Just because you're all good at two shoes with my father and he treats you differently doesn't mean anything. What? Eric blinked. Oh come on, he's always had a happy relationship with you, while I've always been the bane of his existence. I got sick of trying years ago, long before Finn stopped abruptly. Rune. Eric almost couldn't breathe. So many things just happened in a few short sentences. There were a few things Finn never mentioned, Benin and what happened on Rune. But he almost seemed to be jealous of Eric and his mild relationship with Hiccup. His goal was just to upset Finn a little so they didn't look suspicious to anyone watching them. He didn't want to bring out the green-eyed monster. Still. Your dad and I don't even talk that often. Eric replied carefully. And I don't want to say things to upset you on purpose. Really? Eric felt a twinge of guilt, given his reasoning for starting this whole conversation. For this though, he really didn't want to upset him. But I think he tries, and you don't give him much of a chance. No? Finn asked. He's gotten plenty of chances and he screwed them all up. The second my dad finds out about your mistakes. Eric froze when Finn deliberately looked down at his wrapped wrists. Let's see how buddy-buddy with you he stays. Enjoy the friendship now because you can bet anything he can be quite choosy once the demons come out. Eric swallowed thickly. He knows. How does Finn know? Is it that obvious? Finn abruptly stood. Get the terrors. Send me a note by noon. And with that, he stalked off, like the predictable little version of stoic the vast he was. Eric should have felt a rush of satisfaction that his little plan worked. He hoped any guards watching them weren't interested in him now. But instead he felt hollow and empty inside. He never knew that Finn was bitter and angry toward him about Hiccup. Really, Hiccup was too busy to worry about him much. Hiccup had gone out of his way after Oud's funeral to come talk to him. But it wasn't like Hiccup had given Finn no sympathy for Binen's death. He remembered Hiccup's strong grief after the old man died. How could Finn assume that Hiccup cared more about him than his own son? Where was the basis for it? As he stood and dropped his plate into the dirty dishes bin, Eric couldn't rid himself of the sick feeling that he'd just made an enemy. He knew working with the gang was going to cost him in some way, he just didn't realize it would come from this angle. Chief. Hey. Hiccup turned around just in time to see Brandine running toward him at a breakneck pace. His eyebrows shot upward as the boy stopped in front of him, hardly breaking a sweat. The chief couldn't help but be slightly impressed that the Anderson boy was in such good shape. Gods, tracking you down isn't easy. You're all over the place. Brandine shook his head before continuing. Can I have a word? Just for a minute, I'm not like planning to take all day or anything. Hiccup made eye contact with Snotlout, who shrugged. Sure. Mind if we talk in the food storage? Only place we'll get any semblance of privacy in the middle of town other than Gobber's outhouse. Oh yeah, I'll take the storage. Brandine chortled, following the slightly shorter man into the storage shed and securing the door behind him. So what can I do you for? Hiccup asked, sitting down on a nearby chair and gesturing Brandine to sit across from him. If you don't mind, I'd rather be standing up for this. Brandine said almost nervously. I'd join you but I've got to rest this leg as much as I can with all the craziness going on. Hiccup suddenly leaned forward. Actually, before you get to what you're about to say, do you know anything about this gang thing going on? Any little bit of information helps. Well, I was with Nani for a couple of the times they struck, so I'm not involved, you know that. Brandine shook his head. But no, I don't know anything. Sorry, I'll keep my eyes and ears peeled for you if it helps. It does, thank you. Hiccup leaned back in the chair. So? Yeah, my thing. Brandine crossed his arms and leaned against the wall of the shed, pausing for a moment to collect his thoughts. Well, you know, I don't think I've ever done this before, but hey, first time for everything. Done, what? Sorry, I'm not so good at this. Brandine smiled in an apologetic fashion. Well, see, you know how Nani is. Well yes, I am familiar with her. Hiccup smirked at Brandine's obvious sheepishness. You do tend to be familiar with your own children. Comes from raising them since birth. Sorry, yeah, I figured you probably knew her pretty well. Brandine said through a wide grin. Well, I'm still getting to know her and you know. I like it. Well, you know, her. She's a special girl. Pretty, creative, smart, funny, she's the whole package, you know. Well no, I guess not, I mean you are her dad, so it'd be kind of creepy if you did know that in more than just a general sense. Any man would be lucky to have her. Hiccup narrowed his eyes. Is that what you're implying? Because I've known that since she was a toddler. Pretty much. Brandine nodded. I guess I'm asking if it would be alright, sir, to pursue her in a romantic sense rather than the admittedly enjoyable platonic relationship we've had. Are you asking me if it's okay to date my daughter? Hiccup didn't even notice he'd stood up until he found himself upright and staring up at the gigantic teenager in front of him. That would be exactly what I'm asking. Brandine replied, straightening up at the sight of his potential girlfriend's father so stiff at the idea. I didn't think it would be appropriate to pursue her without your blessing. You're such an important part of her life and I wouldn't want you to feel like you needed to come between us. Hiccup was taken slightly aback. He honestly hadn't thought Brandine was that traditional. Most young men didn't ask permission from their potential girlfriend's father before pursuing them. Finn certainly hadn't had any similar conversation with Fishlegs, that was for sure. The Haddock patriarch thought back, recalling the brightened expression on his daughter's face when Brandine was around, the amount of times he'd heard her laughing because of something that the Anderson boy had said. Whether or not it was a match made in a Asgard remained to be seen, but he liked Brandine and it was clear Brandine respected him. Treat her well. Hiccup said at last with a heavy sigh. She deserves the world. Not sure I can give her that. Brandine admitted. But I promise I will treat her right. There was a long, very awkward pause as the two men intentionally looked everywhere except at each other. Finally Brandine locked eyes on Hiccup again. So, is that a yes? Yes. Brandine's eyes were suddenly alight with excitement. You have no idea how happy you've made me, he exclaimed, grabbing Hiccup's hand in his and shaking it vigorously. Don't make me regret this, Brandine. Hiccup said, his eyes boring into the boy's. Wouldn't dream of it. Brandine replied instantly. I intend to treat her like a princess. Good, because she kind of is one. Hiccup nodded once to the teen. Sorry, but if that's all, I do have a lot to do right now. Say no more. Brandine said cheerfully, opening the door to allow the chief to exit the storage first. Finn pulled Helga along through the streets, ignoring her questions. He just kept giving her a smile over his shoulder and walking faster. After that long, boring conversation with Eric and watching her from across the hall for the last hour, Finn decided he was tired of talking. Finally, he spied a cracked open barn door and pulled Helga inside. Helga giggled when he pulled the door shut. What's gotten into you? Shush. Finn shoved her against the door and pressed his mouth against hers. Helga laughed and pulled him closer. Finn slid his hands up her waist, moving his mouth fast and hot against hers. Burying his hands in her hair, which smelled of honeysuckle, he mouthed her neck down to her collarbone, ignoring her laughs at how much it tickled. Finn, what? Would you shut up and just kiss me? Finn asked raggedly. Do you need a reason? Helga suddenly smirked. No. Pulling him flush against her, she grabbed his face and kissed him hard. Finn pressed her back into the wall, forcing himself to forget about everything else and focus on her. She yanked his hair, forcing his neck to bend so she could kiss his jaw. He panted in her ear, willing himself to slow down a little. He might be taking advantage of her just a little, but, well, he didn't want to go too far. You're pretty worked up, Helga murmured in his ear. Finn breathed a laugh and squeezed her waist. Is that a bad thing? Of course not. Helga kissed his mouth and nibbled his lip. What I'm wondering, is why you're holding back. Finn grabbed her hands and pushed them against the wall above her head. Helga yelped when he kissed her again, his tongue searching her mouth. Helga moaned breathlessly, squirming against the wall. She gasped and tilted her head up against the wall as mouthed down her throat. She pulled against his hands, panting when his mouth trailed against the edge of her shirt. He reveled in the frantic sounds of her wanting to put her hands all over him and she couldn't. This was perhaps the only kind of power that made him think twice, but because their parents wouldn't approve, he didn't stop. Finally he let her hands slip and she tackled him. They stumbled for a few feet until his knees hit a hay bale, and she climbed on top of him when he landed on his back. Finn trailed his hands down her back down to her thighs, moaning loudly when her teeth scraped his neck and lips recaptured his mouth. He heard the slight tear of material when he realized she was trying to pull his shirt off. He attacked her throat as he sat up and allowed her to pull it over his head. Somehow the sensation of her skin against his chest and stomach drove him even crazier. Grabbing her thigh, he flipped them so he pinned her down. Helga squealed into his mouth and laughed out loud when he kissed her neck. He wasn't sure why that tickled so much, but any sounds she made while kissing her was amazing. He kissed her harder as she clawed at his back. F. Finn. Why you gonna, give me hickey. Good. Let them see it. Finn moaned before recapturing his lips and slowing down a little. He knew he was jerking her around and knew she liked the slow, hot kisses. Helga relaxed beneath him and sighed heatedly against his mouth. She brushed her fingers through his hair until finally her left fingers brushed against his temple, and she pulled away from his swollen lips with a loud pop. Did you burn yourself? She asked, trying to catch her breath. Finn blinked at her in confusion, his mind a blur. What? There's a big rough burn scar right here. Helga began to pull his hair away to look when Finn's eyes snapped open in realization. No. Helga recoiled as he quickly stood, scrambling away from her. Finn stared down at her in shock, catching his breath. He finally sighed and shook his head. Sorry. It's nothing. Not 30 seconds ago, things were going great. Her disheveled appearance should have filled him with pride. But suddenly, a door had been opened that he'd promised to never open. Of course his past would come to haunt him even now, when he was trying to stifle his emotions from earlier. Such a killjoy. His girlfriend finally sat up and straightened her shirt, a look of confusion wrinkling her face. What is it? I told you, it's nothing. Finn replied defensively. Helga sighed. I'm not. Why do you do that? What? You're all about making out with me, but the second I get anywhere close to talking about things in a serious way, or if I accidentally stumble upon something that you don't like, you get defensive. I'm not getting defensive. Finn growled. Helga made a face. Ugh, not before. I said it was nothing, you're the one who won't let it go. I just asked what it was, that's all. I've never seen it before. Why do you think? Because I don't want you to see it. Helga blinked. You make it sound like it's something to hide. Because I don't. Some things I don't feel like advertising. Finn waved his hands around. I can have secrets without you forcing me to tell you everything, just because you have this idea that sharing is caring. So we can share spit, but not important things. Why is this so important? Why do I need to share it with you? It's important because you're making it important. Helga cried. You're the one making it a big secret. But after all this time, I'd like to think you trusted me enough to share. I don't want to share it with you. I haven't talked to anyone about this since Ben. Finn froze and Helga's eyes widened. Finn. No. You know what, forget it. Finn snatched his shirt off the ground and yanked it back on. Helga followed him to the door. If it's about that stuff, I'm sorry. I'm not. I don't want to force you to talk about stuff if you're not ready. But real couples trust each other with information. Not that information. Finn bellowed. Helga backed against the wall as he approached her. I would give anything to bury all of that into the depths of the earth and never have to look at it again. And you just want to turn everything into some frilly happy conversation about trust. Sorry if I don't operate that way. Okay. Helga replied meekly. Finn vaguely wondered why she was being so quiet. Usually she'd tell him straight when he was being ridiculous. But something seemed to have changed in the last few minutes. She almost looked at him like she was afraid of him. I won't bring it up again. Finn's ire cooled to a simmer. He was still furious, but he didn't think of himself as scary. Helga looked down at her boots awkwardly. Good. She flinched at his response, but before he'd allow himself to feel bad or look into her blue eyes again, he turned and shoved the door open. Stalking into the late morning sun, he grabbed a nearby axe and stalked into the woods. He trudged past large oaks and elms for a while until he found a secluded clearing. Choosing a medium-sized oak, he angrily slammed the blade into the tough wood until his muscles ached, his hands bloomed with new blisters, and finally the tree creaked to one side. It toppled to the ground with a mighty crash, sending birds and other woodland animals chattering into the air and forest. Finn growled loudly and slammed the axe into the ground beyond his feet. He slid to the ground and caught his breath, willing himself to calm down. So many things angered him, and today, everyone seemed to be pushing his buttons. His dad watching him like a hawk, while deserved considering the circumstances, was still annoying. He had this weird paradox in his head that even though he was guilty, how dare his father not trust him? He should totally trust him, like he trusted Adriana, like he trusted his counsel, like he trusted Eric, who was just another problem. Precious Eric, who got to be babied for all the problems he'd been through the past few years, while Finn got overlooked because he was the chief's son, who got pressured to be in the villages and council's good graces but couldn't hold a civil conversation to save his life. Quiet, misunderstood Eric, who was unloved by everyone and seemed to be taking his problems to a whole new level, but he'd surely get sympathy the moment his parents found out. But him. What did he get? Speeches and lectures about how he should act a certain way and not act other ways. And Helga, who wanted to be open and helpful about all the problems she could only guess he was having, because he was being righteously stubborn about not revealing. She wanted a complete, full-circle relationship where they shared things and talked about their problems and worked through them together as a team. What did she think this was? A ticket to marriage. They were teenagers. Sure, a couple more minutes of that heated making out and he probably would have been tempted to make her scream his name, but did that honestly mean he wanted to share every one of his deep dark secrets with her just because they were an item? Did he want to know all of her deep dark secrets, assuming she had any? She'd never had a day of struggle in her life. She didn't take off from home when she was 7, because her parents were fighting. Her mom was a nut job sometimes, but her parents worked together like bread and butter. She didn't get sold into slavery or get branded like a cow to be sold. She was never beaten to a pulp because she didn't scrub a floor properly. What did she know? Finally, the one he hated most out of everyone, himself. Twice today, both with Eric and Helga, he'd slipped and nearly said Benen's name or mentioned Rune. Twice. He hadn't slipped up like that in ages, let alone twice in one day. What was wrong with him? That right there was the heart of all his pain and suffering, and with every ounce of strength he had, he barricaded those feelings inside, unwilling to let them out. But suddenly Eric asks one question about why he's so upset with his chiefly father. Suddenly the ball of grief and anger begins to unravel and everything had to come out. This was pathetic. Finn realized with disgust that tears were running down his face. He roughly wiped his face off with his shirt and snatched the axe out of the ground, which took an extra pull. He huffed angrily and marched away, not caring which direction he was going. Except from the corner of his eye, he saw a large black shape leap out of the bushes. Finn instinctively ducked, but the large creature still tackled him to the ground. Gah! Toothless, get off of me! No, stop it! Ugh! Finn squirmed from beneath his father's dragon, trying to escape the slathering wet tongue. Toothless laughed at his plight before finally allowing him to get up. "Oh, you're so gross, you know that." Toothless warbled in his face. Finn swatted his nose away and scowled. "What are you doing here anyway?" The Night Fury glanced at the fallen tree and gave the teen a flat look. "What? I'm not the only one who's knocked down a few trees when I'm angry." Toothless. "Oh joy." Hiccup finally emerged from the trees, panting. He scowled at his dragon and flicked an ear platelet. "I really hate it when you take off without me." Toothless grumbled in annoyance and Hiccup huffed. "Well, I'm not exactly a limber 15-year-old like I used to be, like this one." Hiccup pointed at Finn with a thumb, but then blinked as if to realize his son was indeed standing there, in the middle of the woods. "Finn." His dad noticed the fallen tree, the axe, and Finn's weepy red eyes, and instantly deduced there was a problem. "What's wrong?" Finn looked away. "Nothing." Are you sure?" "Because you don't look." "Gods, I'm fine." "Why don't you just go back to work, like you always do?" Finn bit his tongue. He hated it when the bitterness slipped out. That was all that seemed to be happening today. Instead of getting defensive like Finn expected, Hiccup calmly asked, "Finn, what's wrong?" A simple question. One that he should have been able to dodge easily. But the more he locked eye contact with his dad, the more he felt the emotions bubbling back up. Gods, it was not a good day. Finn shook his head and turned away, ready to sprint into the trees to die alone. "Finn." Hiccup stepped closer. "No, hey. Hiccup gently grabbed his arm and pulled him closer. "What's the matter?" Finn refused to make eye contact with him, even as the tears welled up. Everything was crashing down at the moment and the slightest slip-up would ruin everything. The slightest blink and the tears would fall, and he refused to let his father see him this weak and small. Hiccup quietly broke the silence. "Finn, you can talk to me." Finn stared up at him tearfully, tempted to burst and just let it out. He was angry. He was tired. This was the first time his dad was showing any sort of concern in ages. But this was also the first time in ages that he was allowing himself to feel. He sniffed and looked down, wiping his eyes on his sleeve. "And nothing. It's just been a rough day." He knew it was a lame excuse, but what was he going to do? Spew every thought of self-pity that he had swirling through his head. Tell him about his spat with Helga while they were alone in a barn. Yeah. A small part of him knew his dad would be more than glad to listen, but the rest of him said to just play innocent. Or else the whole can of worms would be opened. Hiccup was standing there looking confused and concerned. Finn felt a rush of anger that his dad felt the need to be concerned about him. Shouldn't he be worried about what Adriana was doing? She was just always getting into trouble that way. Surely she needed him more right now. What? Finn asked defensively. Hiccup pursed his lips. "I want to help, Finn. But I can't if you don't let me." "Help with what?" the red-haired teen demanded. "I don't need your help, you help Anna." Hiccup winced but still interrupted. "You know. I really don't. She doesn't come to me for things like she used to. But this isn't about her. I don't have one kid, I have two. There's something wrong and I don't want you to sweep it under the rug because you feel like you can't talk to me." "I don't want to talk to you," Finn replied stiffly. Finn knew his words stung, but he couldn't be civil. It wasn't in his character. He'd been rude and mean this long, he couldn't change it. "You need to," Hiccup said carefully. "I'm not going to force you. But it's not good to bottle things up. It will come out one day and it's going to be a whole lot worse than now. Because you're an expert, you know these things." Finn muttered, picking at a loose strand on his sleeve. Hiccup exhaled deeply through his nose. Finn wondered if he was testing his patience. But his dad still sounded placating when he spoke. "Do you remember when your mom and I were fighting when you were little?" "Couldn't forget it." Well, Hiccup ignored the snide remark. "I was like that then. Ever since the duel, I bottled up all my emotions and stored them inside, and hoped that eventually they would just go away." "You remember what happened?" Finn nodded a little. "It doesn't matter if it's a friend or a parent or a spouse or a random acquaintance, things happen. People are going to upset you, or disappoint you." Finn glanced up at his dad. Hiccup took a deep breath. "It's not easy to forgive and forget or let things go. In fact, it's never easy. But to spend these years angry and upset all the time." "What?" Hiccup seemed to be choosing his words carefully. It was like, since his dad had his attention for once, he wasn't going to mess it up. "For once," Finn agreed. "It's not healthy. Your mom and I." Hiccup carefully rested his hands on Finn's shoulders. "We want both of you to be happy. We are proud of both of you in many ways." Finn looked away guiltily. But your teen years are the hardest." Hiccup replied. "The things you do and say now will affect the rest of your life. And I don't mean it like, I expect you to go out and do great things at 15 because I did." Finn looked at him skeptically. "I mean it, Finn, I still can't believe how my life turned out sometimes. I was just a scrawny screw-up who nobody liked, who couldn't do anything right. I don't expect you to change history." "Then what do you expect from me?" Finn asked, surprised by the question that popped out of his mouth. Hiccup thought long and hard, again weighing his words carefully. "Expect is a strong word." "Our dad. Sorry. I know you like straightforward answers and that's not a bad thing. But I don't want to say something that you'll never forget and then I end up saying too much." "Gods, you're so much like your grandfather," Hiccup remarked flatly. Finn cracked a smile and looked away. "And I do believe that is the first smile that I've caused in a long time." Finn rolled his eyes. "You were saying something." "Yes. I expect a lot of things," Hiccup said calmly. "I want different things." "Okay. There's a difference. Are you going to tell me what any of those things are?" "I want you to trust me." "I don't expect it." Finn frowned. "You don't expect me to trust you? That doesn't make me sound very trustworthy." Hiccup nodded once at the great beyond behind his son. "See? Screw up." No, just, elaborate." Finn prompted. He wasn't sure why, but he wanted to understand. Hiccup rubbed his forehead. What I'm trying to say is, I want to earn your trust. I know you don't trust me and that's probably warranted. Something changed when you left home and came back, but there was something in Binnen that you could relate to. Finn tensed. Once again, someone brought it up today. His dad noticed his change in body language. Hiccup held up his hands placatingly. I know. Just, let me say it. Binnen was exactly you needed after that. He taught you a lot. You thrived being his friend and he filled that emptiness that you felt from that. But that doesn't mean I ever should have backed off or assumed that you were fine. Finn felt his blood pressure rising. So what are you trying to say? What, that you're jealous of Binnen? Hiccup's eyes widened. No. Of course not. No, that's not what I meant at all. That you wish we hadn't gotten so close so I would have needed you. So you could have been my hero. No, I'm glad you were friends. Hiccup exclaimed. Finn glared at him, his mouth agape in horror. You just want to replace him. Replace. You want me to give you everything I gave him because he's gone. And no matter how hard you try, you can't be him and that's why we fight all the time, you just can't get me to cooperate like I did with him. No. Finn, I never. Well, it's not going to work, Dad, you'll never replace him. You're not Binnen. Hiccup shook his head desperately. I don't want to be, Finn. I just want to have a relationship with you. Because you feel guilty about pawning me off on him. Pawning you off, Finn. You needed each other, every bit of your relationship was good. Hiccup shoved his hands through his hair in aggravation. He needed you as much as you needed him. I loved him too, Finn, and I'd never be jealous of him for spending time with you. Don't just go away. Finn turned to walk away, grabbing his hair. No, wait. Wait. Hiccup ran to the other side to make him stop. Finn. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm trying to fill my own role as your dad, okay? There was nothing wrong with having Binnen as your closest friend at all, but I didn't make sure you were okay myself. I should have been there for you and I wasn't. I'm sorry. You and your endless apologies. Finn shoved him backwards, the tears welling up in his eyes again. It never stops. Binnen was perfect for you in every way, Finn. Which you'll never be. You can try until Ragnarok and it won't change anything. Hiccup stood up straight and sighed. Why not? I've literally tried everything to be there for you, what can I do? Nothing. You can go away. You've never cared anyway. That's not true. Hiccup shouted. Finally, he seemed to be losing it. I admit I was a lousy parent, which made you take off in the first place, but if I didn't care I wouldn't have brought you back. Where would you be without me? Back on Rune as a freaking slave, Dad. Finn shoved his dad. With Binnen. Not stuck on this stupid piece of land with you. Hiccup shook his head. Binnen never would have wanted that. Your mother and I would die without you here. Finn rolled his eyes. Yeah, because I bring so much joy into your lives. You're our son, it doesn't matter whether you bring us joy or pain, we'll still love you, and if he were here, Binnen would still love you too. Finn shook his head. It doesn't matter. It does matter, Finn. Hiccup replied. If there's one thing Binnen showed us it's that we can never give up on the ones we love. Stop. Finn said with a quavering voice, gripping his hair in his hands. Binnen loved you more than you. Binnen's dead. Finn finally shouted, raising a fist and slamming it into Hiccup's chest. Hiccup winced, though from the physical blow or the shout, Finn wasn't sure. His watery gaze dropped to the ground, his fist shaky against his father's chest. His throat began to throb as his words echoed in his mind. He sniffed loudly and choked out, Binnen's dead. Finn. Hiccup whispered. Finn shook his head and stepped back, his red face contorting into pain he could no longer hide. No, come here. Hiccup bridged the gap in one stride and pulled his son into his chest. Finn melted, his shoulders shaking from the suppressed sobs. Hiccup held him tightly, praying for some kind of answer. More than anything, he wished Binnen was here. How did his little boy get so lost? How did he ever let it get this bad? Was there something he could have done? Tears burned his own eyes at the sight of his broken little man, who was strong and smart and fierce in ways that he himself craved as a 15-year-old. He couldn't fix this no matter how hard he tried. Was there any way to fix it? I miss him, Finn whispered. Hiccup held him tighter. I know you do. I miss him too. But strength isn't just measured by your muscles or how long you can go without breaking down. It's measured by the size of your heart. Binnen said that. And it's true. He loved you. He wanted to teach you everything he could. Finn's heart tugged guiltily, knowing that everything he was associated with, everything he started with his friends, was completely against what Binnen had taught. He would have slapped him silly for making out with Helga, too. Finn's heart twisted in his chest, being slightly tempted to come clean to his dad right here and now about everything. He owed it to Binnen. But this wasn't Binnen. This was his father, who failed again and again. What kind of role model was he? If Binnen was here, well, lots of things would be different. But if Binnen was here, he definitely would fess up. He'd repent and change his ways. But this guy. His dad had plenty of his own problems. He always managed to do everything right where his family wasn't concerned. No. Finn didn't owe him anything. Abruptly pulling out of Hiccup's arms, he backed away. This doesn't change anything. Hiccup swallowed. Why not, Finn? Because I don't need you. Yes, you do. Finn. Hiccup sighed and looked away for a moment. Okay. Finn blinked in surprise. What? Hiccup licked his lips and slowly stepped closer to his son. Resting his hands on his shoulders, he took a deep breath and said, I'm right here when you need me. Okay. Finn narrowed his eyes. I don't. I'm right here when you need me. Finn blinked in confusion, surprised that his dad wasn't being more pushy or upset. Hiccup's gaze was firm and unwavering, but full of sadness. Finn knew deep down that his dad wanted to help and he was being too stubborn to allow it. But what could he do? He wasn't Binnen. He couldn't bring him back. He wasn't even there when the accident had happened. He should have been there. But like the great father he was never there when he was needed most. So why would Finn give him a chance now? Backing out of his father's hold, he walked out of the clearing. He glanced at Toothless sitting nearby and stopped in confusion. He'd been alone in the clearing while chopping down the tree. The axe was still lying on the ground near Hiccup, where he'd dropped it. Toothless had appeared out of nowhere, his father not far behind. Whirling on his heel, Finn asked, Wait. How did you know I was here? Hiccup snapped out of his dazed expression. What? Oh. I think Toothless heard the tree fall. We were watching the perimeter and he took off. Finn fought to keep his face neutral. The statement told him everything he needed to know. Eric was right, they were watching everybody. And if he'd thought about it beforehand, he wouldn't have asked. Because if his dad was on his tail, there was another breadcrumb to follow, his skeptical question. Whatever. The Haddock teen turned away and walked through the woods. He straightened his back and willed himself to be calm and collected as always, repeating his gang's message as he left his father in the clearing. Keep moving. Don't look back. Stay strong. Fortis. Hiccup trekked through the village, feeling worn and raw and exposed. He couldn't fake a smile at the few people who said hello to him in passing, but luckily no one stopped to ask questions. He ignored pretty much anyone around him. But finally a cackle of laughter caught his attention and he walked toward it swiftly. He found Astrid standing outside the bakery with Rough Nut and Tough Nut, the twins joking about Thor knew what. Without explanation to the twins, Hiccup grasped Astrid's elbow and steered her away. At first she tensed, but relaxed when she knew it was him. But her face clouded when she saw his expression. What's wrong? I need to talk to you. Clearly. They found an empty barn nearby and stepped inside. Astrid quickly closed the door as Hiccup sighed, rubbing his face. Stepping in front of him, she asked again, What's wrong? Hiccup sighed, trying to gather his thoughts. I was watching the perimeter earlier with Toothless and a couple guards, when we heard this crash in the woods. Like a tree had fallen. Astrid nodded. Toothless took off before I could get on his back, so I chased after him. Well, when I finally caught up, who do I find talking to him other than Finn? Really? Astrid wrinkled her brow. Why? Well, I wasn't sure at first, but he was really emotional. I kept asking him what was wrong because it was very obvious something wasn't right. But he just said he was having a bad day. And then Hiccup sighed. Then Hiccup told her everything. It took some time and he had to pause now and then to fight tears, but eventually they were sitting on the ground against hay bales by the time he finished. And he just walked away. Left me standing there in the clearing, feeling as lost and guilty as ever. Astrid was silent for a long minute. He had to break down at some point. He's been tense for weeks. He just puts up this fake it that he's a happy-go-lucky teen guy, but he can't do it forever. Hiccup nodded. When I said that about Binnen, I didn't mean it to turn into a huge fight. But suddenly I just got so mad. I'm tired of him acting like he was the only one who was hurt when Binnen died. Like Binnen belonged to him exclusively, and how dare anybody else feel grief and sadness that he's gone. And then, he acts like I'm jealous of Binnen. No. I know. I mean, I'm sorry, I know you're upset, but are you listening to yourself? I don't want to act like he's deluded, but sorry, that's delusional. Hiccup. How could anybody be jealous of Binnen over anything? And if Finn was hearing you right now, I think he'd kill you. Hiccup sighed heavily. Yeah. Me and my big mouth. At least, for the end, it was you. He let you hold him for a few minutes. That's a good thing, isn't it? Astrid asked. Hiccup sighed and rubbed his eyes. I don't know, Astrid. I don't know what to do anymore. I just keep thinking that I could have done something. What could I have done different? I'm definitely not saying I did it all right, but Finn won't let me in. Since he finally snapped out of that 2-week days and I tried to be nice or talk or anything, he'd just shut me out. I've never been let back in since. Hiccup held up his palms. What can I do anymore that I haven't tried? We just have to keep doing what Binnen said to us. Never give up on them. Adri's finally starting to come around, here and there. Finn might too. He's so much different. He's so bitter and... Hiccup exhaled. And I just feel like a lousy father. You're not a lousy father. Astrid frowned. A lousy father doesn't stick around. A lousy father doesn't try again and again. Hiccup hummed non-committally. Astrid sighed and pulled him into a hug. I'm sorry. It's okay. Hiccup jerked back. What? Oh. Hiccup winced, rubbing his chest. Lovely. Realization dawned on her. My gods, what did he do? Well, when he got angry when we were talking about Binnen, he punched me. Astrid flicked his nose, making him yelp. She began to lift his shirt. Why didn't you tell me? He could have broken your ribs. I don't care. This is serious. Look at that. Astrid pointed at the large black and blue bruise blooming on his chest. He could really hurt you. Hiccup shrugged. I can take the physical pain he dishes out. It's him I'm worried about. Astrid, don't you get it? He's suffering. He feels alone and acts like nobody cares, especially me. And there's nothing we can do about it unless he lets us help him. Astrid breathed through her nose. I'll try and talk to him. Are you sure? I'll try to talk to him tonight, when he's had the rest of the day to calm down. Seeing as I'll be alone tonight. Again. Hiccup didn't miss the pointedness in her words. I'm sorry. She smiled wanly and gave him a chaste kiss. I understand. Soon. Soon. Good. Come on, let's get lunch. I'm starving. Okay. Hiccup accepted his wife's hand and she hauled him to his feet. As they made their way to the Great Hall, Hiccup couldn't help but look toward the forge, wondering if his son was inside working, despite the fact that it was Sunday and the teenagers weren't supposed to work on weekends. He wished there was something he could say or do to gain his little man's trust, but he supposed he had to be patient and loving. "I'll be here when you need me," Hiccup murmured under his breath. "What?" Astrid asked. "Nothing." Taking her hand, Hiccup led her up the stairs toward the hall, away from the son that so desperately needed a father. Eric couldn't believe he was doing this. To avoid detection from the guards keeping watch of the entrance to the terror messaging house, he had to climb down a cliff, which required taking an hour-long hike out of his way so he could get to said cliff located above the terror house. He'd watched the guards shift at 10 o'clock. He hoped by 11, they'd switch again, though he wasn't positive. Either way, he had to be quick. Luckily there was a large boulder located at the top of the cliff, and he'd brought a few yards of rope. Tying a quick rig that allowed him to rappel down the cliffside without falling to his death, Eric gradually eased himself down. He kept one eye on the guards as he went, thankful for the thick tree cover surrounding him. He was glad to have found a mask to wear and changed his clothes from what he was wearing at breakfast as well, just in case. He wasn't taking any chances. Except from the itching cuts on his forearms, he would be able to make a quick climb back up the cliff if he needed to escape. As long as the archers didn't shoot him down. He wasn't sure what Hiccup's policy was on catching wanted criminals. He figured he'd have to take the chance and hope Hiccup hadn't issued a kill-on-sight kind of deal. Finally, the roof to the terror house loomed just below him. Turning away from the cliff, he soundlessly dropped onto the roof. He waited a few minutes in silence to escape detection, and right on cue, 3 new guards emerged from the path that led to the village. The guards in front of the doorway simultaneously sighed in relief and trudged forward, allowing the new shift to take over. Eric pressed himself against the roof to avoid detection. All 6 guards stood in a circle chatting for a few minutes. Eric mentally debated if he wanted to make his move now, or wait until there was only 3. He was honestly afraid to breathe, which was hard enough in the stuffy cotton mask, and the almost noonday sun beating on his back was making him sweat like crazy. Maybe black was a little too obvious a color to wear anyway. Nighttime would have been preferable for this ordeal, but he didn't want to wait for 10 hours to get the terrors, then send out the messages to the gang late tonight, and then hopefully do the breakout tomorrow night. PFT. Best be proactive before he talked himself out of it. Finally, the guards continued on their way, leaving the new shift to watch in silence. Eric decided to make his move before they got too comfortable and could hear his movement. Scrambling toward the back of the roof as quietly as he could, Eric dropped to the ground. He wasn't sure who put a back door on a building that was backed up to a cliff, with only 1.5 feet of clearance, but he figured the building wasn't originally built for storing terrible terrors as messengers. For all he knew, this building used to be the dragon skinning location in the old days. Not only was there a door in the back of the building against the cliff wall, but there was also a lock on the door. Eric shook his head and held out his palms. What? Whose idea? What kind of moron? What was the point? If Eric survived this and had opportunity, he really wanted to ask who built this place. He wasn't a professional in building himself, but he didn't think the individual had very many brain cells. Eric, focus. Eric shook himself and pulled out a pocket knife from his boot. Sticking the point into the lock, he began to jimmy back and forth, trying to be as quiet as possible. Luckily when he was close friends with Adriana, he'd done lots of reading. One book that always fascinated him was one on locks, codes, and ciphers. While he enjoyed fiction just as much, that was a book he'd read countless times. Finally, he had good reason to have this sort of knowledge. Well, was it good knowledge if it was for criminal activity? Oh, what was he doing? Finally, the lock snapped open. Eric dropped it to the ground and opened the door, wincing when the hinges squeaked. He froze. No sounds came from the guards out front, so he slipped inside. Luckily he was thin enough to squeeze into the dim room. He eyed the front door suspiciously for a few moments, waiting for the guards to sense his presence. When nothing happened, he focused on the room around him. Eric's eyes widened. When people said Hiccup could communicate with just about anybody with his terrors, they weren't chalking it down to a number. There were literally dozens of terrible terrors scattered throughout the room, sitting in various nests, drinking from water troughs or snacking on fish from a large bowl in the center of the room. Hiccup was obviously not one to lock up dragons, so rumor had it when he'd trained the small dragons to be messengers, he'd let the terrors go free now and then. Over time they'd come to enjoy the indoors and would always come back. Now he didn't have to worry about retraining dragons over and over again. This was his personal flock of trustworthy messengers that he trusted with any kind of message, particularly those between the other chiefs. Now that he was inside, Eric had to hope the terrors wouldn't give him away. Terrors got loud when excited. Also, how many did he take? Would they even go with him? These were Hiccup's personal messengers, his little entourage. Would they go with someone they didn't know? He hoped so, or all of this would be for nothing. Inching forward on light feet, Eric poked 3 terrors sitting in a nest. They lifted their heads and looked at him with large round eyes. "Hey guys," Eric whispered, pulling his mask off his face so they could see him. The green one crooned at him and licked his hand. He realized this one was Sharpshot, one of Hiccup's first terrors to train. He'd definitely seen this dragon a few times. The blue and red one sat there skeptically, but Sharpshot kept them calm. "For now. I need some messages delivered. Think you can help me out?" Eric asked. Sharpshot squeaked in approval and crawled onto his shoulder. "How about you guys?" The red and blue one hissed at him loudly, leaping out of their nest to fly around the room. "No. Sure," Eric whispered hoarsely. "Sharpshot, make them stop." Sharpshot growled at them loudly, which only aggravated many of the other dragons. It was like the younger messengers were sick of the old man messenger bossing them around. Eric gritted his teeth, willing them to be quiet, when it happened. The doorknob jiggled from the front. Eric jerked his mask back on and sped outside the back door, Sharpshot speeding after him. He didn't have time to close the door and reattach the lock. He jumped as high as he could and grabbed the roof. The cuts on his arms flared in protest as he hauled himself onto the roof, just as the guards spread out around the building. "I could have sworn I heard something. The terrors are upset too. Fan out." Eric held his breath, lying flat against his back, his heart pounding in his chest. He stared at the rope, dangling down the cliff. Luckily there was no wind, so it hadn't been noticed yet. He wondered if he could outrun the guards in the woods or even on the trail. No, they'd call reinforcements before he'd get halfway to the village. At least up the cliff, they'd have to get dragons from the village to get up the cliff, he'd be long gone by then. Back doors opened, so someone was here. But where'd he go? Eric carefully got to his hands and knees, staring at the rope just above the roof. He'd have to time it just right. He wouldn't get a second chance at this. If he got caught, the gang was done. "Phil, go get the chief." "I don't like." Eric sprinted to the edge of the roof. Kicking off the stone wall, he stretched upwards and barely managed to grab the rope. "Up there. Get him." Eric growled, grabbing farther up the rope and hauling himself higher. His muscles strained and he could feel the cuts on his forearms tear open. Gritting his teeth, he gained traction with his boots and began to scale the wall as fast as he could. Sharpshot zipped to the top of the cliff, squeaking encouragements down at him. An arrow hit the rocks beside him, spraying rock and dust over him. He coughed but pressed forward, adrenaline helping him to move quicker. "Hey! You can't get away." A sharp pain sliced his calf muscle as another arrow slammed into the cliff. Eric yelped, forcing himself to keep moving. If they were to hit him again, he'd drop. He didn't want to die like this, just because he signed up for a stupid gang yesterday. The chief wouldn't find his body. Eric glanced down at the guards again, the archer notching another arrow. The teenager gasped as the guard released the arrow, but the aim was high. He realized in horror that it almost hit the rope. He was almost to the top, he couldn't fall now. Using one free hand, Eric grabbed the arrow stuck in the stone and used it to pull himself to the top. Hauling himself over the cliff edge, he looked just in time to see an arrow whiz over his head into the woods beyond. Eric gasped heavily, panting through the mask. Sharpshot squeaked in concern by his leg. Eric peered over the edge to see 2 of the 3 guards sprinting down the path, as expected. Sitting up, Eric lifted his pant leg to inspect the damage. Luckily, it was a mild cut from the arrow. Not very deep, but he'd need a few stitches. Great, evidence. Hiccup wouldn't want to look at every leg of every teenager on Burke, but he certainly could. Plus, he was going to leave a blood trail. Using his knife, Eric quickly cut a large strip of fabric off his sleeve and tightly wrapped his leg. Without another second to waste, he took off into the woods at a run. Sharpshot, come on. The terrible terror squeaked and quickly followed. He didn't get very far when a familiar roar echoed across the hills. At first, Eric was terrified Hiccup was about to leap onto him from Toothless, but then he realized Toothless didn't sound like a deadly nadder. Looking up into the sky, Eric skidded to a halt. Charger! The green deadly nadder came in for a landing, not a moment too soon. Eric laughed and gave his dragon a hug. Boy, am I glad to see you. Let's get out of here. Pulling himself into the saddle took more effort than usual, due to the hard climb he'd just finished. His arms shook and he knew his arms were bleeding. He'd have to take care of those once he got to Mildew's, where he'd stashed his other clothes. Charger took off with a wild excitement, glad that his rider finally wanted to spend some time with him. Staying under the cloud cover, they flew to the other side of the forest as fast as they could. Halfway there, Eric laughed. He actually did it. He broke in, stole a terror, and got away with next to no injuries. Sharpshot happily flew beside them. He wondered if it even constituted as stealing if the dragon went willingly. Either way, Finn had a point. The challenge and adrenaline rush were addicting. He almost couldn't wait for nightfall. Chapter 12, Moves and Counter-Moves. Chapter text. Finn huffed in annoyance, willing himself to listen to the conversation around him. It was a different group of people than usual, mainly to avoid suspicion from his dad. The boy currently yucking was Cliff, a curly-haired boy who didn't seem to understand the concept of silence. The teen was currently explaining the conceptual difference between moths and butterflies. Helga seemed interested enough, sitting beside him, considering who her father was. There was definitely a space between them on the bench. Who knew a mere 2 inches could feel so distant and cold? Just a few hours ago they'd been closer than usual, in the physical sense. But now it seemed there was a gap between them, and not only where the bench was concerned. Finn sighed heavily behind his hand. He'd screwed up for sure. He knew he was being ridiculous in some ways, but most of the time he truly believed he had a right to his attitude. Did he have any right to forcefully make out with her because he was upset over a conversation with a completely different person? His heart lurched. Of course he didn't. Did he have a right to get upset when his girlfriend wanted him to spill every one of his deep dark secrets? Heck yes. Right. Stealing a quick glance, he noticed Helga definitely ignoring him. Her shoulders angled just away from him, nodding and smiling at Cliff as he talked, her eyes trained on him completely. He didn't necessarily feel jealousy toward the other teen for his girlfriend's attention, per se. He did, but not because he felt competition. Cliff knew his position, he'd be squashed like a bug if he crossed the line. The fact that he was allowing the curly-haired boy to sit at the same table was generous enough. At the same time, Finn felt bad. He'd hurt Helga's feelings one way or another. The look of fear that she'd given him just before leaving the barn. He couldn't get it out of his head. Did he scare her? He'd lashed out at her, perhaps that was it. She didn't seem to be afraid of him any other time. She hadn't told him to stop kissing her, and he'd like to think he would stop if she asked. He hoped. The thought made his stomach churn and he stared down at the floor, swallowing the bile in his throat. If Helga asked him to stop, would he? She was tough and tenacious in ways that he honestly admired. He didn't have any intentions of hurting her in any way. He hadn't thought about it at all. But when the road started to get bumpy, she was the one he turned to. Not for advice. Not to talk or get help in any way. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He was using her. When he had some problem that upset him, Helga was there to make him feel strong again. But this was an angle of strength he hadn't thought of before. He hadn't realized just how out of line he was. He didn't want to abuse her. That's not what he wanted. But that's exactly what he was doing. Finn's face flushed and he immediately rubbed his forehead. Hopefully nobody was noticing his sudden embarrassment and horror for his own actions. Suddenly he wanted to drag her out of the room, but for a completely different reason. For the first time, he wanted to apologize for something. He didn't want her to be afraid of him, he didn't want to be an abusive jerk that objectified women because he couldn't handle his own problems. The problems were a completely different issue. He wasn't going soft, he wouldn't be changing the whole lot. But he didn't want to screw up Helga. Literally. Before Finn could make his move, his attention was drawn elsewhere. The great hall doors slammed open and two guards rushed in, scanning the room as quickly as they could. Finn frowned, watching as they found the chief and bounded over. From the council's table, Hiccup saw them coming and stiffened in his seat, waiting patiently for them to reach him. Finn watched with piqued interest as a guard grabbed Hiccup's shoulder and urgently whispered something in his ear. His dad's face morphed from confusion into concern in a matter of seconds. Then he was on his feet, pointing guards toward the doors and signaling Toothless. Murmurs broke out through the hall, everyone simultaneously wondering what was happening. Gobber stood and told everyone to calm down, focus on their meals and conversations. But Finn's eyes never left his father as he quickly walked to the doors, and then disappeared outside. Wherever he was going, it was urgent. Suddenly, it hit him. Finn had completely forgotten, but it was almost noon. He was supposed to be receiving a terror message soon. Eric. Finn whispered. Helga flashed him a warning look. Finn nearly slapped himself for speaking aloud, especially when a few other teens looked at him. He was having serious problems today. Cliff frowned. What? Finn scowled and shook his head. Nothing. Sounded like. Finn interrupted with a deadly tone. I'm starting to wonder why people don't like having you around. Maybe you're just a little too talkative. Cliff's face reddened, but not in embarrassment. Leaning forward on his elbow, he murmured so only Finn and Helga could hear. And I'm starting to wonder why the heck anyone puts up with you, Finn. At least I'm flexible and can take the insults people dish at me. What about you? What are you going to do when everyone leaves you to sit by yourself? Finn saw red. More than anything he wanted to lunge across the table and break the little punk's nose for daring to open his mouth. But Helga's bright eyes at the corner of his vision spoke volumes. She was waiting for his response. Everyone seemed to watching, waiting for his response. While the entire great hall carried on, Finn found himself at a crossroads that he normally wouldn't hesitate to decide on. This punk deserved to be put in his place. Unclenching his jaw, Finn finally found his voice. Don't push me. Standing without another word, Finn stalked out of the great hall without looking back. Stepping into the sunlight, he felt choked and alone. He marched around the side of the hall and slid to the ground. That was the first time he'd ever allowed anyone to insult him, and he didn't retaliate. He wasn't proud of himself for doing a good deed because he didn't think of himself as good. First, he discovered he was an abusive boyfriend. Now he realized he was the bully everyone else saw. While he thought he was tough and cool, someone to be worshipped, everyone in fact saw a tyrant, a selfish jerk that blew up when he didn't have control. The control was slipping more and more as the day went on. He could feel it. He didn't know why today was going so badly, and it was only noon. He thought back to his father's words earlier that day, I'm right here when you need me. Finn felt the sudden urge to find him. He was digging himself into a hole that was a whole lot bigger than he'd realized. The surrounding ground was starting to cave in and soon he'd be buried alive. Should he accept the hand offered to him? Should he allow someone to pull him out? I can do this, Finn whispered, burying his face into his knees. I have to get a grip. Some things had to change. He had to apologize to Helga, for instance. But he quashed the urge to talk to his father about everything. His dad couldn't help him. The repercussions would be too great and he'd only be punished. Obviously he didn't want to be punished, but it was more than that. Deep down, he wanted something. He didn't even know what it was anymore. Love. A hug. His father's approval. Common sense said if you do the right thing, you'll get approval. So why couldn't he just do the right thing? Why couldn't he be kind? What happened to turn him into this kind of monster, so much so that he didn't even realize it? Benen died. Finn's throat felt like it would snap. Once again, emotion overwhelmed him. It was like he'd suddenly turned into his sister overnight and he couldn't stop having second thoughts or having the urge to blubber at the drop of a hat. What was wrong with him? Irritation bubbled inside him. If somebody turned a corner and saw him sitting in the shadows crying like a little girl who lost her dolly, he'd never hear the end of it. Somehow he didn't care. Hugging his knees against the great hall, Finn stayed in that position until his muscles began to cramp and the sun's position had changed. The tears had long since dried and he felt much calmer. His heart was still heavy, but for once he was glad he wasn't participating with the gang tonight. He wanted to go home, hug his pillow, and sleep. A growl sounded from the rooftop, disrupting the peace. He slowly looked up to see a green terrible terror swoop down and land in front of him, huffing a plume of smoke, clearly irritated. Finn slowly exhaled and pulled the message off the dragon's leg. "So you're the chosen one, eh?" Finn asked. The dragon hissed at him, clearly miffed at the obscure hiding place. "Sorry. Been a long day." The terror cocked his head at the boy as he opened the note. The terror looked familiar, but Finn shrugged it off, not thinking on it further. The note read: "Barely got away with one. Stay low, guards everywhere. Gathering supplies next. Send him back to me and I'll get the rest of the messages out. L." Finn frowned at the initials. He knew the message was from Eric, so why'd he change the letters around? Then he realized with a smirk that if the note was intercepted somehow, his dad would look for someone with the initials of LE, not EL. Yep, Eric was smart. Really smart. Finn pulled out a pencil from his boot. "It's irritating when you can't find one," and scrawled K beneath Eric's initials. He didn't bother putting his initials. If his dad were to intercept the note, a mixture of FFH wouldn't be hard to track. Leaving it blank was the better option. Eric Larson. Finn murmured to the dragon as he tied the note back on its leg. The dragon licked his hand and scampered off, taking off in the shadows toward the back of the hall. Finn watched it fly away, briefly wondering if he knew the dragon. It certainly looked familiar. Sighing heavily, he leaned his head back against the wall and stared at the sky. If he needed to lie low, so be it. He'd be just fine right here until he decided to go home. For now, he was content to sit alone and listen to the birds chirp. He felt drained of all energy from all the emotion and chopping the tree down earlier. Footsteps sounded from the corner and he looked over to see Helga briskly walking over. A pang of guilt made him look away as she slid into a seated position with a few inches of space between them. They sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Finn felt the need to speak up. He wanted to apologize anyway. But Helga had searched him out, so she must want to say something as well. After nearly 5 minutes of silence, he couldn't take it anymore. "Hey." Finn began. "I know I've been a jerk lately. I'm sorry." Helga blew her bangs off her forehead. "That's underestimating things a little bit, don't you think? You're out of control." "Sorry." "No, you're not sorry." Helga cried out. Finn winced at the sudden height in volume. "That's the problem, Finn. You're mean to everybody and you don't care. And top of that, to you I'm just a plaything, something you can use to make yourself feel better when you're upset." Finn rubbed his face. "I know. I really am sorry. I didn't. I never wanted things to turn out like this. With us." "What did you want?" Helga asked firmly. Finn searched her face. He saw real anger in her eyes, and hurt. She had a lot of her mom's features but her father's intellect, something he'd admired in her for years. She wasn't a girly girl like his sister, though she could be if she wanted to be. But most of the time she fought for her place at the top, right there with the guys. With him. Finally she looked away, clearly aggravated at his lack of response. "You never even liked me, did you?" "What?" Finn asked incredulously. "Of course I did. What changed then?" "Who said anything changed?" "Finn." Helga finally stood, towering above him. "You've been treating me like this for a long time. I've stood by and watched my friend, someone I trusted, turn into something mean and hard to be around. You don't respect me, you don't talk to me about anything, and you use me to make yourself feel strong when you're not. Finn felt heat rise to his face, only partial embarrassment. Standing, he growled, I'm trying to apologize for my screw-ups. Shouldn't that amount to something? Not if it isn't real. And the way you treated Cliff in there, an actually very sweet guy, showed me exactly who you are and who you want to be. Helge jabbed his chest. You only want me around for the physical aspect. You don't want a real relationship. Then what, pray tell, defines a real relationship? Trust. To be frank, I don't trust you, Finn. Finn blinked, but Helge continued, the way you make out with me, how would I know you wouldn't just as easily go to any other girl for it? Finn's jaw dropped. Are you kidding me? First off, you liked it. Don't act like you were begging me to stop because you said nothing. Helge closed her mouth. Second, I have not kissed any other girls besides you. Ever. I might be a jerk, but I'm not a cheater. Helge swallowed and crossed her arms. How would I know that? You don't really act like you care about me at all. Because I don't give you flowers every day. Helge's jaw tightened. Because you don't show it at all. I don't know about you, but I think dating should have a purpose. I don't want to date just for the heck of it. I want to find a man who is kind and helps people, and tells me where I have screwed up so I can learn to do better. I want someone who can be my friend. Helge shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears now. And you're not that man, Finn. You're just a boy. Finn breathed a short scoff. We're not exactly adults, Helge. We're not far off. 2 years and we can sit in on council meetings. We could legally get married in 2 years, have you ever thought about that? No, because marriage isn't exactly on my list of priorities right now. Finn frowned. Sorry if that gets your braid in a bunch, but it's really not. Helge gritted her teeth. Marriage isn't even the issue. I'm tired of being used and abused. And I already said sorry at the beginning. I'll try to do better. Helge closed her eyes and shook her head. I don't think you deserve that chance. Finn blinked. What? Steeling herself, Helge straightened and looked him in the eye. Her eyes were brimmed with tears, which was strange for him to see. He couldn't remember the last time she'd cried in front of him. I'm breaking up with you, Finn. I think it would be best if we stopped seeing each other. Finn felt like his brain had shut down. He stared at her blankly before he finally shook his head. What? Helge swallowed. Finn. No, Finn waved his hands around. You're not serious. Yes, I'm very serious. Helge wiped her eyes on her wrist. I can't change you, Finn. And I can't help you if you won't let me. What is it with everybody today? Finn growled, pacing the stone walkway. Helge jumped in surprise. Why can't anybody get the gist? I don't want anybody's help. And that there lies your problem. Helge cried. You're so thick-headed and stubborn. How many people have offered to help you? How many people try again and again to be nice to you and you spit them in the face for it? How many times have I tried to help you move on and get help and be kind, and you still don't? Oh yeah, be kind and generous and soft-spoken, and for what? None of those things got me anywhere. When was the last time you tried? Maybe if you put a little effort into it, not that it takes all that much for normal people, you'd find that it's not so lonely in the world when you're nice. That was the kind of thing Binnen taught you, wasn't it? Finn froze. Shut up. No, what would he say to you if he saw you now? Helge pressed. He'd despise the boy you've become, so much time and effort and love he put into you and you throw it in his face. Shut up. Finn grabbed her arm and shoved her against the wall. Helge yelped, cowering against the wall as he towered over her. Don't say another word. If you want out, fine. I don't need you around and I don't need you telling me how to live my life. Finn sneered in her face. Helge trembled in his grasp, trying to pull free. Let me go. I'm not finished. Finn growled. If you say one word to anyone about the gang or even think about deserting, I'm zoning in on Gunnar. Helga's eyes widened. What? No. If you lay one hand on him, I'll. You'll what? Finn whispered hoarsely, nearly touching his forehead to hers. Helga stared at him in terror, afraid to move or breathe. And don't think I won't check in with the others. I'll know if you decide to take off. Helga pushed at his wrist, tears threatening to fall. Please let me go. I'll be there tonight, just don't hurt Gunnar. Finn, please. Finn released her, allowing her to stumble away. She leaned against the wall from 10 feet away, watching him warily as if waiting for him to grab her again. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she held her arm, where a scalding red handprint appeared. Roughly wiping her face, she scrambled away, ducking into the trees nearby. Finn watched her go without remorse. 4 hours ago, he'd been kissing her senseless in a barn. Now he couldn't care less what happened to her. He'd recognized his problem, apologized and vowed to make amends, and this was how she repaid him. No more. Something had officially snapped. Finn was finished with everyone. From here on out, he relied on himself. He couldn't allow his soft father's words to get into his head and heart, he couldn't allow himself to grow weak under conscience. He couldn't allow any touchy subjects, not Benin, not Rune, not slavery, not anything, to throw him into an emotional downward spiral. He had to be stronger than this. From now on, nothing stood in his way. Hiccup inspected the bloodstains in the grass at the top of the cliff, chewing his lip pensively. He'd sent guards into the forest to search for the assailant, just in case, but he didn't need to be told that he was long gone. He hoped the injury wasn't serious because really, he didn't want anyone to get hurt. He was glad the archer hadn't shot the kid down. But still, another bust with no clues as to who was in the gang. So what do you think? Fishlegs asked from behind him, leaning against Meatlug. The small gathering of council members and their dragons stood in a semicircle behind him or on the ground below at the terror house, all waiting for instructions. Hiccup blew air past his lips. Not exactly a hit. More like a clever attempt to have other means of communication without meeting as a group. He slowly stood from his crouch, feeling the blood rush to his bad knee. He bent the limb a few times to get rid of the heated tingling. Smart. Now what? Horst asked, crossing his arms. We can't scour the entire population looking for a teenager with a cut leg. No, we can't. Hiccup agreed. There's a number of reasons we aren't doing that. It would be nice if we could track people by blood sample. That'd save us a lot of time for sure. Fishlegs nodded vehemently. Like, if there was some kind of tracking system by fingerprints or blood samples. Genius. Hiccup watched the other council members glance at each other in concern, then smirked. It's an interesting theory, gentlemen. But that's an experiment for another day. Mounting Toothless, he said, all right, let's see the damage. Toothless swooped to the ground far below, sniffing the dirt around the outside of the terror house. Hiccup slid back to the ground, gazing up the cliff wall, and whistled. Kid had to be strong to get away that fast. Snotlout snorted from nearby. Probably just adrenaline. Maybe. Hiccup turned and inspected the lock and hinges on the back door. Kale and Free are pretty strong, even Evan. Who knows who else is in the group? Manny the Mad grunted. Guards said the kid was skinny. Wait, skinny guys can't be strong. Hiccup grinned, locating the lock in the grass. You're not strong, Chief, Manny countered. You're lean. Snotlout and Fishlegs snickered. Hiccup narrowed his eyes. I am too strong. It's all the flying. You couldn't beat your son in an arm wrestling contest. Hiccup winced at the mention of Finn. I could if I wanted to. But you don't, so you wouldn't. So my comment stands. Hiccup shook his head, inspecting the lock. Anyway, nothing on the door or lock seems to show any damage. This kid knew how to pick a lock. Snotlout huffed. So Hiccup replied. He's using his brain instead of leaving a bunch of evidence. If the terrors hadn't caused a ruckus inside, the kid could have replaced the lock and left without leaving any evidence behind whatsoever. The chief paused, tapping the lock in his palm. That's actually a stroke of genius, come to think of it. How's that? Snotlout asked in a bored tone. Fishlegs intervened. Come on, Snotlout, these kids have been leaving messes behind everywhere they've gone. They're getting smarter. Or they've rallied someone who is smarter. Hiccup countered, stepping inside the house. The men followed. And the difference is? Snotlout asked. The difference, Snotlout Hiccup said as he greeted a few terrors, is in who's coming up with the plans. So far they've done nothing but one thing, destroy. Suddenly, there's a strategy. I mean, come on, the chieftain gestured at the room. What kid thinks to break into the chief's personal messaging center to steal a terror to communicate outside of meeting as a group just as the chief has issued a triple watch on the village? That's not just some kid trying destroy property, this. Hiccup shook his head. This is a strategy. Fishlegs shook his head, glancing at Horst as he joined the men from inside. But why? That's what I'm not getting. What's the purpose? Hiccup shrugged. You got me. Destroying property is just flat-out rebellion, to me. This is different. To me, when someone thinks of a deliberate strategy to try to blow past me, that's far different. This is an outright test of my security in the village, whether these kids think it's this serious or not, it is. They're testing my capability to protect our people, it doesn't matter if it's petty or not. Because if real enemies out there find out our own children can get past me. Right. Horst nodded. We'll have a lot more problems than teenage dissension. Fishlegs sighed. Snotlout nodded solemnly in agreement. Hiccup ran a hand through his hair in frustration. The next time they make a move, we'll be there waiting. Snotlout gestured to the terrors sitting around them. So what about them? What can we do about the missing one? Hiccup scanned the room with a furrowed brow. He turned in a full circle as if looking for something in particular. Wait a second. He turned again, searching the rafters and nests all around them. Missing something? Snotlout asked. Hiccup gave him a flat look. Yes. A terrible terror, Snotlout. Have you seen one? I've seen many in the last few minutes. I'll gladly throw one at your face. Hiccup rolled his eyes and kept searching. Where are you? Horst stepped forward with a look of surprise. Wait, do you know which one is missing? The chief finally stopped turning as a grin spread on his face. Oh, they're good. He chuckled mildly and shook his head. They're really, really good, I'll hand it to them. This kid was smart. Snotlout shook his head in confusion. Didn't we cover this already? Hiccup smirked. They're good. But not good enough. What are you talking about? There is only one terrible terror that I use on a fairly consistent basis. Hiccup crossed his arms smugly. He's calm, he's smart, and he knows everyone on the island and all the surrounding chieftains in the archipelago for that matter. He's the first terror I ever trained. Fishleg's eyes widened. No way. They didn't really. Hiccup's smirk widened. Sharp shot. So Snotlout shrugged, unimpressed. Great. Call him back and let's see if he can lead us to the gang. Horst's eyes twinkled. While that's not a bad idea. I'll let them have him for a bit. Hiccup amended. See if we can't intercept a message now and then. Sharpshot won't have any trouble finding me when I call, and he'll understand when I tell him to go back to the gang. I'll feed him double for his hard work. Because everybody knows that a terror trained well, Fishlegs crossed arms, always returns to his master. Hiccup finished. Hey, Nani. Brandine said cheerfully when he met Adriana in the entrance to the Great Hall. How were the kiddies? Magnus's kids are so cute. Adriana gushed. I wish I had a niece or nephew. Have you ever heard a baby giggle? It's adorable. I guess. Brandine stopped himself from rolling his eyes at the last second. As far as he was concerned, babies were drool factories. So you want to get a good seat, or should we stand out here gabbing until all the good food is taken? Sorry, let's go. Adriana allowed him to open the door for her and sauntered into the Great Hall. A delicious smell filled her nostrils. Roast chicken. Wow, That's my favorite. Brandine smiled. Is it? Well, that's a funny coincidence. Take a seat, I'll get some for you. Well, thank you. Adriana smiled and sat down at a table close to the wall so she could read her book without too many people squeezing past her. She had started a new series about a boy who fought monsters and went to summer camp, and she wasn't sure if she liked it or not, but she couldn't quite bring herself to put it down just yet. Oh, you like that series? Adriana looked up to find a pair of grey eyes staring at her from just over her head. Isn't it the best? Sorry, do I know you? Adriana asked, only vaguely recognizing the teenage boy standing over her. Sort of. The boy sat down next to her. Cliff Smedley. He held out a hand, which she shook awkwardly. I'm only the best leather shop guy ever. Doesn't Eric work there? Adriana's chest tightened at the mention of her former friend, but if Cliff sensed her discomfort, he didn't let on. Oh yeah, my bra. Cliff's face brightened up. He's only the love of my life. The book slipped out of Adriana's hands at this statement. Sorry, what? Nah, not like romantic true love. Cliff vehemently shook his head. I mean, Eric's a handsome lad, really, but I'm not into, you know, that. Right. Adriana said through her teeth, picking up her book and trying to find her place. Ah, sorry if I made it awkward. Cliff grinned widely. I should really explain what I mean by love of my life to prevent future confusion. What I mean is we've got this connection, like we're soulmates, but we're bros, we're bromates. No. We're bromantic. That's it. Deep connection but bros. It's a thing. I'm gonna make it a thing. Have fun with that. Adriana raised an eyebrow. Oh, don't be a stick in the mud. I see why you and Eric were besties forever. He's a bit of a grouch too. Cliff put his elbow on the table and rested his cheek on his hand. Not that you're a grouch. Well, maybe sometimes, because everyone is a grouch sometimes. I'm a grouch when I stay up too late. Unless I've had lots of sugar. Then I'm bouncing off the walls until like 3 AM and then crash until noon. Totally worth it. Last time I did that, I drew a picture. I still don't know what it's supposed to be, but it's high art. I'll show it to you sometime when you and Eric are besties again. Because any friend of my bra is my friend. Adriana breathed a laugh. You have a lot to say. Oh yeah. Everybody says I talk too much. I don't think of it that way, I think I just educate everyone around me. Like you. Did you know that leather comes in like a zillion colors if you can figure out what dyes to use? You probably knew that though, I mean you've got a purple saddle. Cliff rambled, gesticulating wildly. What's up with the purple anyway? It was my favorite color. Adriana emphasized. But favorite colors are for kids. I still like it okay. Who says? My favorite color is yellow. Cliff announced far too loudly. And Eric's is totally red. I see him wearing it most of the time. He wouldn't dye so much of his clothes red if he didn't like it. Actually, it's blue. Adriana replied automatically. He just wears red because that's Nicholas's favorite color and they're his old clothes. Oh. Cliff nodded. Okay, that makes sense. Didn't take the hand-me-down thing into account. So is your big sister really into green and brown? I don't have a sister. Adriana said slowly, suddenly confused again. So why do you wear so much of it? You should wear more colors. Bet you'd look awesome in blue or red or purple or yellow. What are you doing here? Came another masculine voice from just over their heads. Cliff and Adriana looked up to see Brandine, his hands both grasping a plate of food each. Just getting to know your friend. Cliff said unabashedly. She's cool. Hey, you could sit at my table. No thanks. But I kind of need to have a bit of a private conversation with Nani, so if you don't mind. Brandine jerked his head in the direction of the middle of the hall. Never let it be said that I can't follow simple social cues. Cliff nodded politely. But the offer still stands, Bran. See you, Annabeth. Brandine. Brandine said in a warning tone as Cliff scampered away. He looked at Adriana again. Annabeth. I guess I have a new nickname. Adriana shrugged. I seem to accumulate them. That kid is so obnoxious, sorry you had to put up with him. Brandine said irritably. I think he's okay. Adriana said dismissively as Brandine placed her dinner in front of her. Oh wow, they are serving all my favorites today. Ha, would you look at that? Brandine chirped, sounding exceptionally unsurprised as he sat down across from her. Your favorite foods, and your favorite guy you like that follows you around and ticks off your dad, all in one place. Adriana gave him a quizzical look. Brandine. What are you scheming? Brandine continued as if she hadn't spoken. And, dare I say, your favorite boyfriend. Adriana's mouth dropped open. Brandine laughed at her expression. I was kidding, he said, and her heart seemed to fall out. I'm your only boyfriend. Probably. She caught it again. Probably my boyfriend, or probably the only boyfriend I have. She managed to choke out. Yes. Brandine nodded, placing his hand atop hers. He was being facetious, she realized, but she didn't care. This felt so nice. She squeezed her boyfriend's hand. Yes, for me too. Brandine leaned across the table and tenderly kissed her. Her breath hitched in her throat until he finally backed away, the smile still on his face. As they ate and talked, Adriana felt like she was having an out-of-body experience, like there was another, much prettier girl in her place. Her boyfriend, the word itself felt foreign, too good to be true, gently rested his hand atop hers as they sat across from each other and shared some of the food from his plate. So engrossed were they in each other that they didn't even notice the hole was empty until night had fallen and the candles were being extinguished. Welp, time to get home. Brandine said at last, hopping to his feet and extending a hand to help her up as well. Gotta get up bright and early. For what? Adriana asked. Work. You don't go in until 11. Gotta exercise. How do you think I keep up my manly physique? Brandine flexed dramatically, making Adriana giggle. As they walked out of the Great Hall, he assumed an impish grin. You know, I've been here a long time. I bet I could show you places you don't even know about. Adriana raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Yes, it is. And I can prove it. Take. Brandine's eyes scanned their surroundings for a moment before they landed on a nearby shed. Take this shed for instance. Looks pretty dilapidated. Now you might think, Brandine, my man, that shed has no use, it's just a stack of rotted wood. And this is where I'd say au contraire, milady, this is where they store the dragon dung for later use. It has magical properties, you know. Adriana had only a second to laugh at the absurdity of this statement before Brandine yanked her over to a small nearby creek. And this is known as Hiccuping Creek. You'd think it's named after our dear leader, but alas no, it precedes him by 341 years after your ancestors discovered its use as a cure for hiccups and other respiratory illnesses. Of course it does. Adriana agreed with a nod. Now what of the forge? Ah, it's a good thing you asked, for that is the highlight of this little tour. Brandine gestured to the forge as they passed it. The forge is the most mysterious building on Berk. For when the Vikings first settled here generations ago, it was the only building they found, already fully stocked with everything they could possibly need. It was Gobba's great-great-great-great-grandfather who began working here, but its origins were never discovered. To this day, no one knows who built it or whether or not the treasure map they found in one of the drawers leads to a real place or if it's actually an ancient recipe for pudding. On and on they went, Brandine's fake history lessons getting more and more outrageous until they finally reached the Haddock house. Adriana's heart sank, she had been having so much fun, the time seemed to have flown by in a split second. Aha, now this place is one of the most interesting places of all. Brandine said as he pointed to the Haddock home. You might think it's because it belongs to our all-powerful chief, his amazing wife, and our unique heir, he said in a dramatic voice. But that's not why this place is the best. He turned to Adriana and gently took her hands in his. This is where you find the most beautiful girl on Berk. He leaned down and their lips met. Adriana felt a swooping sensation in her stomach as she kissed him back. This was perfection. She wanted to capture this moment and hang it on her wall to give her joy later on. But then, this was her boyfriend. The happy moments would keep on coming, maybe forever if she played this right. Suddenly, a loud noise interrupted their romantic moment. Their lips separated with a tiny pop and they looked around, bewildered. "Did you see anything weird on the way here?" Adriana asked as the sound repeated. "Because I think those are alarm bells." Brandine hummed, his smile melting into a determined frown. "Nani, maybe you should stay in the house. You're safer that way." "I don't think so," Adriana said stubbornly. "Something's going on and I want to know what it is." "Look, it's dangerous," Brandine said in a voice that was, perhaps, a bit sharper than intended. "Your dad would want to make sure you're kept safe." "My dad knows I'm old enough to make decisions like this on my own," Adriana insisted. "So let's go." Silence was bliss. Finn lay against his bed on his stomach, face half mashed into his pillow as he listened to the crickets chirp outside. In his hand he idly rubbed the necklace Binnen had made for him as he gazed out the window, listening for any sounds. Eric was out there somewhere with the gang, preparing to pull off their biggest stunt yet. Under normal circumstances, he'd want to be out there. Usually he led the operations. But tonight he was more than happy to stay home. If they got caught tonight, he didn't want to be present. Sure, he'd probably get thrown under the wagon if they got caught, but without proof of his participation in the past hits, his father wouldn't have much to convict him on. Luckily, he'd been smart enough to not leave clues around. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts and he lifted his head to see his mother crack the door open. "Hey," Astrid smiled as she walked in. "Hey," Finn murmured as he relaxed once more. He watched her walk the length of the room and then slide into a sitting position against the wall beside his nightstand. Resting her arms against her knees, she watched him in silence. The teenager frowned. "What? Anything you want to talk about?" His scowl deepened and he shifted uncomfortably. "No." "Positive?" Astrid asked lightly. "Because a little birdie told me you had a bad day." "Little birdie has a big mouth," Finn muttered. "I'm fine." Astrid watched him silently. "You don't look fine, Finn." "What's wrong?" "Just tired. It was a long day." The blonde watched as her son stared at the floor next to her feet, refusing to make eye contact. She wondered how long it would take for him to crack if she stared at him long enough. After several minutes, and a few glances in her direction, Finn finally sighed. "Helga broke up with me today." "Oh." Astrid blinked in surprise. Of all the things she'd expected, or rather, hoped, him to say, that wasn't on the list. "I'm sorry, Finn. You were together for a long time." Finn shrugged, a bland expression on his face. "Wouldn't have lasted forever anyway." "Why is that?" "Too alike, I guess. And I think she was expecting more that I wasn't willing to give." Astrid raised an eyebrow. "Like?" Finn blushed and looked away. No, not like that. Just talking about stuff and me not wanting to. Bunch of stuff about trust and healthy relationships." "I see." Astrid nodded, hugging her knees. "Relationships are hard. Some people expect more after a certain amount of time, while others aren't necessarily ready. It takes a lot of communication for a relationship to thrive." Finn gave no comment besides a half-hearted shrug. He felt a little bad acting like the breakup was the only thing that was bothering him. As if anything was bothering him. The breakup had happened long after his meltdown with his father, which was surely what she'd been referring to at the beginning of the conversation. But with his mom, he felt he could at least tell her about the breakup to inform her. "Things will be fine," Astrid amended. "Don't worry about it." Finn snorted. "I'm not worried about anything." She was the one being antsy. Astrid considered his words in silence before filing them away to ponder later. Cracking her knuckles loudly, she asked, "So what about this morning? With your father in the woods?" Finn closed his eyes and mentally sighed. "Nothing. It was nothing. Can't have been nothing. I was just having a rough morning." Finn sat up on his elbows and rubbed his eyes. "Happens to everyone now and then, doesn't it?" Astrid nodded a bit. "Yes. But I think it was a little more intense than that, wouldn't you say? Finn frowned at her. You weren't there. No, I wasn't. But I trust your father's word. Yep. You would. Fighting the skull trying to jump onto her face, Astrid said, Finn, I trust him with my life. I trust his judgment on many things, just about everything. He didn't concoct some story and tell me every detail to make you upset or uncomfortable. He's my husband as much as he is your dad. When he has a concern, in whatever situation it could apply, he isn't doing anything wrong by talking to me about it. Don't you think? Finn stared at his pillow, unwavering. Finn, look at me. The teenager's blue eyes finally locked on hers. Astrid saw many things in that moment: anger, hurt, turmoil. Maybe even fear. She wanted to understand why he allowed himself to be so lost and alone. Why did he choose this? She and Hiccup were literally standing there with open arms, waiting for him to come. Why did he always turn away? Instead of voicing these thoughts, Astrid firmly said, Your father loves you, Finn. You're strong and smart and talented in ways that he wasn't as a teenager. He had to work hard to get where he is now, and he doesn't look at your natural talents with jealousy. Finn swallowed, twisting his necklace on a finger. We're so different, he muttered. Things have been hard for so long, and he's always apologizing for things. Finn, what do you want him to do? Astrid asked gently. No matter what he does for both of you, sometimes you look at him like he's a burden. That's the kind of treatment he got when we were young teenagers. No matter how hard he sought approval, people always talked down to him like he was meaningless. That's the vibe that he gets from you. Like what he says or does doesn't matter. He doesn't feel important to you, because you don't give him a chance. He needs to feel important. Finn griped. Astrid smirked. People like him take great pride in others' approval, especially their loved ones. People like him. There's more out there. Astrid poked his arm. Be nice. He takes things very personally. You and me, we're not emotional people. We prefer to get things done quickly and efficiently, no questions or comments needed. Then there's your father and Audrey. They need to think through every angle and talk and ask questions and go through the steps and have a plan B and C and D. It's infuriating for sure, but Astrid paused with a smile. You learn to appreciate it if you give it a chance. Different isn't wrong or bad. It's just different. Finn rubbed his eyes. So your point? Give him a chance, Finn. Astrid amended. Please. This isn't about making your dad feel good about himself, I'm not saying that at all. But don't you think your relationship with him would be so much different if you let him in? Finn gave her a sidelong glance. I'm tired of being let down. I'm sick of empty promises. Astrid shook her head. He's not perfect, Finn. We're not perfect. Parenting is hard, you two didn't come with a manual. Every day is different. I have a feeling if there was a parenting manual, he'd still mess up. Every parent would. Just like every child isn't going to listen to every rule that is set up, parents are going to make mistakes just as much. We're humans too. Astrid reached over and rested her hand atop of his. Finn marveled at how much smaller her hands were by comparison. He'd never noticed it before. But the difference, Finn, is when we screw up. His mother paused momentarily. Try not to hold it against us. Don't be bitter forever. We want you to be happy. Happy. The word was practically foreign. He could barely remember what it felt like. In years, it seemed he hadn't felt joyful or laughed out loud at something so hard that it made him nearly cry. That used to happen a lot when he was younger, whether he'd made a stupid joke or a friend did something wacky. Many of those times were with Helga. Most of those times were with Benin. Finn felt a tug in his chest. The thought of how long it had been since he felt truly happy spurned a wave of loneliness and depression that he quickly quashed. He held on to the ice-cold block of bitterness in his heart, reminding himself of every reason he was rightfully angry. But he could practically feel the emotional wreck in his heart begin to unfurl. He did not want to cry again today. Astrid seemed to sense his inner turmoil. Getting to her knees, she leaned forward and warmly kissed his forehead. "We're right here when you need us, Finn. Don't ever forget that." The teenager saw her stand and move toward his door. Again, a small part of him wanted to jump up, hug her tight and tell her every one of his dark, dirty secrets. But two things stopped him: one, his pride. And two, the sound of a huge explosion a few blocks into the village. Finn gaped at the window. What was Eric doing out there? Instead he said in fake concern, "What was that?" "Gang." Astrid tore out the door and pounded down the stairs. Finn ran to the window and watched in mild fascination as the shapes of dragons and their riders flew to wherever the explosion had taken place. It seemed to be coming from near the square. He knew the diversion was taking place and Eric was currently focused elsewhere. Then, out of the corner of his eye, somewhere near the jail, a plume of smoke rose. Finn squinted at the houses and his eyes widened. There were houses on fire. What was Eric doing? Snatching his boots and tugging them on as he nearly toppled down the stairs, Finn tore out of the house toward the barn just as Astrid and Stormfly were preparing to take off. "Mom." "Finn. Stay here. There's a fire." "Houses." Finn pointed. Astrid's face went slack. "That's the Thorstons. Come on." Taking her hand, Finn jumped into the saddle behind her. Stormfly instantly took off, racing toward the rising flames. The Haddock gritted his teeth together as they flew. If somebody got seriously hurt or killed, he was going to kill Eric with his bare hands. Chapter 13, Jailbreak. Chapter text. Under normal circumstances, a daddy-daughter date wouldn't take place after dark. But the Jorgensens weren't exactly normal. After dinner, Snotlout had asked his only daughter if she'd go on an evening flight with him as he scouted the island perimeter. Inga was ecstatic. What other kid her age was allowed to do a perimeter scout with their father? Of course, Inga had to be careful. Though her seizures were far and few between, they still weren't sure what the trigger was. It seemed to be sporadic and out of the blue at times. Especially when flying, her parents preferred her to be in good company who'd keep an eye on her. It bugged her a bit that she couldn't just go out and do something without someone always watching her. But after the first few incidents, she'd come to accept it. She didn't want to be alone or flying 1,000 feet in the air with no one to catch her if something happened. Inga enjoyed the chilly nighttime air as they flew, Hookfang and Misty nipping at each other and Snotlout warning them to be careful. "Relax, Dad," Inga grinned, deeply inhaling. "They're fine. Don't be such a worrywart." Snotlout puffed out his chest. "Worrywart? I am not. You so are. By the way, you look like you haven't shaved in days." "Oh. Wouldn't you know that's because I haven't shaved in days?" Snotlout smirked, scratching his scruffy face. Things had been so hectic the last few days, he and the other council members were pulling out all the stops to help Hiccup. He was beginning to look more worse for wear as the days dragged on, and the village couldn't afford him to crash. Unfortunately that meant the daily shave routine was put on hold. "Mom likes it." Snotlout smirked. "Does she now?" Yup, Inga nodded. "She said it was hot, as a matter of fact." I'll have to ask." "If by ask you mean do something weird or awkward, you can leave me out of it." Gladly." Snotlout swallowed, wondering just what she meant by such a statement. She was only 11. Finally the Jorgensens rounded the final bend, passing the large braziers standing tall in the ocean, their fires roaring in the navy darkness. Burke looked peaceful with the random torches lit around the island. Now and then Snotlout could see a guard walk down a path, carrying a torch. As if on cue, Inga piped up, "Lots of guards out tonight." "Yup. Are they going to catch the gang?" Snotlout pondered her words as he guided both dragons toward the square, holding up a hand in greeting to another passing guard. Hookfang and Misty landed, stretching their wings. The Jorgensen patriarch assisted his daughter to the ground and finally replied, "Yes. That's the plan." HMPH. Inga crossed her arms as they began the walk home. The streets were narrow around their house, so it was better to walk. Wouldn't do to crash a monstrous nightmare and changing into the neighbors' houses so late at night. "Who's in it?" Her father glanced at her in concern. Don't worry about it, Inga. It'll be over soon anyway. Well yeah, but I'll eventually know who was in it anyway, won't I? Once you catch them. Inga prompted. So who's in it? Inga. Snotlout rubbed his face. We don't know yet. The girl frowned, her short dark hair falling in her face for a moment before she shoved it back. You don't. But. Snotlout suddenly stuck a hand out to stop her, his eyes focused on a wall nearby. A man was silently sitting in the shadows between two barrels. If it weren't for the slight gleam of moonlight hitting his prosthetic, Snotlout would have challenged the man. Instead, he sighed and let his arm drop. Hiccup. The chief waved a hand in greeting. Hey. You two are out late. I let her come on patrol with me. Everything looks good. Snotlout stepped closer. What are you doing out here? Oh you know. Hiccup glanced around the empty street. Just keeping an eye out. Snotlout shook his head. You look exhausted. Go home, Hiccup. And where's Toothless? Ruth. Hiccup looked up. Sure enough, the Night Fury's black scales glittered in the soft moonlight and green eyes peered down at them from the edge. And I can't go home. Yes, you really sure? Inga poked his arm. Come on, Dad, the man's got a gang to catch. Sure. Snotlout reprimanded hoarsely. Inga. Oh, Mrs. Haddock totally kicked him out, Inga stated matter-of-factly. She did? Snotlout asked. She did. Hiccup echoed. Yes. I spoke with her. Inga nodded. She said she forbade you to return home until, how did she put it, you'd put those fiends behind bars to suffer for their impudence. Or something. Hiccup blinked. I was not aware of such a statement. Inga wagged her finger. Yes, you're not allowed to go home until you catch them. Ha. I haven't been able to go home much anyway. Hiccup snickered. Which is technically no laughing matter. Oh pish-posh Snotlout. Yeah, pish-posh Snotlout. Hiccup laughed out loud at the shared look between Jorgensens. I could watch you two banter all day. It's seriously one of the most entertaining things. Oh shut up, Haddock, or I will bust you up. Inga gasped. You can't bust up the chief. What would Mom say? Hiccup snorted. What would Mom say? Hey, don't mock my daughter. Mock? I'm not mocking anyone. You're laughing. You're laughing too. I am not. Inside. I don't laugh and I don't cry. Yes, Snotlout, I remember all the dust that has fallen into your eyes over the decades. So much dust. It's a wonder nobody's invented a dust collector by now. Snotlout shook a finger at him. What? How would you even collect dust? Inga watched them banter like watching a ball being thrown back and forth. I don't know, but you should invent something, Lout. Maybe you'll be finally recognized for contributing to the greater good. Inga snorted. Ouch. Snotlout whirled on her. Whose side are you on? Whichever makes me laugh the most. Hiccup raised a hand. I believe I've made her laugh the most so far. No. I'm her father, I've spent loads more time with her since she came from the womb. That's awkward. I do believe I've made her laugh loads more than you. Fine fine, whatever. Hiccup shook his head, snickering at Inga's disgusted expression. Was this kind of behavior the extent of your relationship growing up? Inga asked. Or is this because both of you are getting old and senile? Inga. Hiccup snorted. Hey, I agree with her. You're definitely getting old and senile. I honestly couldn't tell you which time was worse. Snotlout crossed his arms. It was worse when we were younger. Hiccup shook his head. Trust me. Every good friendship has a rocky beginning. Not every relationship. Hiccup wrinkled his brow. Pretty much all of yours did. Hiccup huffed. Well, aren't you a ray of sunshine? Hey, I just call em as I see em. Snotlout waved his hand, glancing back at Hookfang and Misty behind them, digging into nearby fish barrels. Apparently it's snack time. Apparently. Inga shook her head, baffled. Both of you are loonies. Thank you, Miss Jorgensen. Hiccup smiled. The best of us are, wouldn't you agree? Snotlout pulled his daughter back. Keep your loony self and your loony weirdness away from her. Inga gave him an incredulous look. Oh please, loonies are harmless. Without warning, a large boom echoed across the village. Snotlout jerked Inga toward the wall as Hiccup jumped to his feet. Toothless and the other dragons jumped to their feet, hissing and spreading their wings in warning. A few shouts sounded from near the square.